Hey, it's a little after 2:30 on Monday. We have a study session today with the fire department here, and I'll look to City Manager Scragg to get us started before he probably turns it over to the.
Yeah, I think I may have more introductory comments than usual for a study session, but this is the culmination of quite a bit of discussion that we've been having as an organization. You may recall in strategic planning, we talked about equipment needs and funding and budgeting goals for the organization and the fire department. And then we followed up with the capital improvement plan, tried to identify funding for particular pieces of equipment that the fire department had identified as needing replaced within their fleet. They've done a considerable amount of work, and I certainly want to commend them for that. And there's a lot of detail in the study session presentation for you today. We did have kind of a last-minute development as it relates to project authorization. There is a specific state statute that relates to bond financing of fire equipment and provides for a 60-day protest period. And in the fire department's defense, that was news to all of us, so a lot of their analysis didn't take that into account at the outset. And given the changing nature of the timelines and the pricing as it relates to fire equipment, that is a unique curveball that we're going to have to deal with. That would put us out into February. We've had this came to light last week as we were putting this study session presentation together and getting it out the door. There's been some conversations with vendors in that intervening amount of time. We met just at 1 o'clock today, and I shared with the department asking for their patience and may have to ask for your patience as well. Would like to go through this presentation, give you all the detail and the research that they've done, recognizing that there may be a little bit more work to do in terms of finalizing pricing as it relates to that 60-day protest period. And some of that will come out as part of this conversation. But I guess my main point is, even though we started out with a recommendation, we're going to pull back from that just a little bit and walk you through the information that we've gathered, the work that's been done, the process that we're proposing. You may have seen on the agenda today there is a project authorization item that would start the clock on that 60-day time frame for a protest petition, and then depending on the feedback we get from you, we could do additional research as needed to report back some additional details if needed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Snyder and Battalion Chief Herzog. They are the ones that are kind of taking the lead on the presentation, and I know that there's a lot of fire department personnel as well as Debbie Pack that are very knowledgeable, so this conversation may jump around a little bit as people try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon. Just a very brief introduction to get us started. This process started just a few months after my arrival last year. And I tasked Chief Herzog with identifying a team of members within the department of different ranks and different responsibilities to form a collaborative team with a foundation of a process to evaluate our current status of our fleet, what we needed to do, how soon we needed to do it, and what would be sustainable over an extended period of time so that we could continually plan for this on an annual basis. You all had seen that prior to today in our strategic planning meetings. They related to NFPA, ISO, and some other best practices by some other organizations, because NFPA can be a little stringent and we understand how we use our apparatus, so we came up with a very good timeline of what we expect and anticipate, and he and his team, most of them sitting here, did an outstanding job in putting this together, and it's been a constant, we're in the current, so current changes every day and every hour at times. So Chief Herzog is going to walk through this presentation, and any of us here, depending on the question, will go from there. We've had tremendous help and support and collaboration from City Manager's office, from the Finance office, and everybody involved to get to where we're at, and it's been a lot of work. So, Chief, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Derek Herzog. I know I sound a little hoarse. I'm due for surgery again. I have recurring throat issues, so if you can't understand me, holler. I'll try and speak louder or have somebody else talk. But to jump on top of Chief Snyder's deal, I do have my team here with me. Everybody was here. We did start this, kind of came down from the city manager through the chief on to us of looking at a way to kind of clean up our process, if you will. I'm new to this position, as is the chief here, so I've been here doing this as long as he has, so this kind of got dumped on us. People that used to do it are all gone. So it was kind of a perfect time to kind of reassess how we do this. So with the PowerPoint, want to go to the next one? We'll just get started. So how did we get here? So start off with the committee, kind of like we talked about. City manager directed the fire chief, came to me. I came up with a team, got some officers. Casey's a big piece here, the first guy in the blue shirt. He's our EVT. So he's our emergency vehicle technician, so he's our mechanic. Really understands numbers of like what we're looking at, cost per mile, what those maintenance costs looks like going in the future and whatnot. After we formed the team, we made some initial phone calls to a bunch of peer departments and to other departments that are not our size, just to kind of see what processes they do or don't go through. Maybe manufacturers they use, why they use this, why they like this piece of apparatus or not. We just really tried to open up the entire thing, right? Not be stuck with doing the things that we were doing in the past, maybe even the truck so much as what we were doing in the past. There's something that we thought was better that would accommodate our city and our department better, to look at those as well. So after we made those phone calls, we actually went out and made a trip, went to several departments, and actually talked to them in person, looked at the trucks, looked at different pieces of apparatus, different manufacturers, to see like, okay, we kind of like this makes sense for our department. You know, this is kind of a collaboration of what we would like to have, right, if we were to get some new stuff. The chief did mention in the strategic planning, when you guys approved that, the original plan, and you guys, you probably don't have that with you, the original plan, when we looked at it, we started with replacing our first out trucks that we currently have. So that number that Debbie has was actually for 3 engines and a single quint. After research and looking at where we are versus where we used to be, another piece of the strategic plan that was separate was Station 4 up at Marymount and Crawford. When I started too many years ago, we had a quint up there. That quint went by the wayside because of financial. We couldn't buy another one when we needed to. So those numbers came in at that amount. After all this was said and done, we were able to add a quint back into it, same amount of trucks, but add that quint back in to, for the betterment of the department and the city, and still come in under what we originally estimated these numbers at. So
You
I think that was
clarify a quint versus a pumper.
right. Yeah, fair enough. So. Fair enough. So pumpers, what we're going to be looking at when I start talking things, pumpers are what normal people would, when you think of a fire truck, right? Just a regular fire truck driving down the road. That's our engine, our pumper. Quints are with the 5, right? So yeah, like you said, quintuplets. So they have a pump, they have a ladder, they have ground ladders, they have hoses, all these things that make them up. So the difference between what we consider a quint and what we will consider a platform in here. If you've seen it in the parade or been downtown, or actually, so you can see it here, the one on the left that's up would be the platform. It has a basket on it. Okay, so we can put multiple people in there for rescues. It still allows us to flow water out of that tip. The one on the right is what we consider a quint. There's no basket. Still do a little bit of rescue, but we can't put as many people right on that for safety reasons, but we can still flow water. So that quint is what we're looking at, that add an additional one to. And then the rescue trucks look similar to a pumper. You won't see the catwalk through it, but it's like our heavy rescue truck that has all of the tools to get people out of car wrecks or any sorts of voids and whatnot. So along with that, like I said, we were looking at our department and our apparatus needs. That's where we came up with adding that quint. That quint helps us with our ISO numbers. When you talk about ISO, and the chief or some of these guys may know better than I do, but there's kind of circles that ISO looks at for insurance purposes, that you have to have so much apparatus, so many amount of people within a certain time frame, or I shouldn't say time frame, but a mile radius. And they consider that with what they're protecting, whether it's downtown, right, the height of buildings, and those kinds of things. So that gives us the ability to raise our ISO number a little bit with that. Contacts. We initially contacted some vendors that we have used in the past to get some brief numbers along with the peer departments that we talked to, kind of numbers that we were looking at initially because we weren't sure. When we start talking to vendors, hey, we're looking at maybe buying a fire truck in 2 years. They don't know what the price is. So we're very hesitant to say, oh, yeah, this is what it's going to be. So we looked at what inflation numbers were and what they've been doing with fire apparatus in the last couple of years. They've been anywhere from 5 to 10% per quarter, not per year, per quarter. So that's a huge amount of money when you talk 3 months later, 3 months later, 3 months later. So that's where we got our numbers. In our contacts when we were visiting with people, a lot of people are going to the cooperative purchasing. So that's where we went with Sourcewell. The majority of our peers are using Sourcewell or HGAC. What that allows us to do is they take a lot of the bidding out of the process. It's not a true, when I'm on the school board, I think of like state contracts, right? State contracts, the bidding is done, it's certified, we know, we pull it, we don't have to go out for bid. So consortium, it's a little bit more than that, but you can go into their website, pull out the dealers. They have special offers for doing that, buying in groups, buying out of this consortium group, special financing for those that want to apply that way. So we went through there, we brought that back to the city manager's office, and I believe Mr. Wood was the one that vetted Sourcewell. So that's why we kind of stuck with Sourcewell. With the process, with the then and now, in the past, we're talking back when I started almost 25 years ago, the guys that wrote specs would go to fire chief comes to city commission, or city manager comes to city commission, right, and says, fire department needs a truck. Okay, you guys can buy a truck, but we need to know how much. They write specs, right, it's 4 to 5 months, they get their specs done, then they come back, and then they do the bid process, there's another 3 to 4 months, and then it's above what we wanted, or whatever the case, and now we go back. And so it literally took a year and a half, 2 years in some cases, to even get from we need a truck to we can order one, plus how much longer it's going to take to get them. So that was one of the reasons that we wanted to go to this idea with going through Sourcewell and consortiums, talking with the other departments. Kind of, it's not quite, but it's almost like going to, like say, Long MacArthur and picking your truck. Like there's one here, I want this one, except I want it in red, and we can get it coming. So trying to take this process down to this and make it easier so that when I'm not here 10 years from now, and a couple of these guys, some of these guys should be, but that it's not we got to start all over again. The plan is in place that we're doing this and this and this and not going through everything. Truck numbers, again, back to what was approved earlier in the year. Truck numbers, we're looking at replacing 7 trucks. In essence, that is our entire first out fleet. So we have our 7 trucks that we consider first out. Some of them are cross-staffed. For instance, what I mean by that, the ladder truck we were talking about earlier is cross-staffed with our rescue truck. So depending upon the call, they either take the rescue truck or they take the platform. So looking at replacing those and then taking those trucks that are currently in a first due or first out location, moving them back to our reserve trucks. If we go back, and I think it's in here later, but we have trucks in service as our reserve trucks. There you go, Jacob's got it there. That are, where's the years at? Years aren't in there. So anyway, but we've got some that are 1989. Yeah, 34 to 35 years old in our reserve status, which, as you can imagine, are not necessarily great. I don't keep my car that long, but.
So let me jump in real quick.
Yep.
So to understand this chart, when I mentioned earlier before Chief Herzog took over, when I looked at NFPA and ISO, I also considered some other best practices, and I did some research, and some organizations were using basically a scoring sheet, number of miles, number of years, and whatnot. So we used that as well to also evaluate and kind of prove what we had seen with NFPA recommendations. And it shows that, fewer than 18 points is an excellent vehicle. We have 1 of our whole fleet. 18 to 22 is good, and we have 2 of those. And then 23 to 27 qualifies for replacement, and those are the blue. And then the red is 28 and above, condition 4 needs immediate consideration. So you can see it's a dire need for us as an organization. So that was one of the additional steps we took to kind of make substantive what we had also looked at compared to NFPA.
So it can be a little bit confusing. This whole thing's probably going to be confusing, even though it makes sense in my head, but we're just a bunch of dumb firemen, so we think it's kind of simple. But when you look at this chart, as the chief was mentioning, you'll see that there's 5 trucks in the red and 3 in the blue, right? If you consider the fact that it takes a year to a year and a half to get trucks, those blue ones are in the red. So that's 8 trucks, right? In theory, we're only asking for 7. Part of that is if the very bottom one, the hazmat truck, the reason that it's so high numbers is because of its age, right? It doesn't get the use, so we are actually looking at repurposing that. We would replace that with a new truck, but repurpose that into a backup rescue truck, because with our wonderful EVT, we've been able to take very good care of that one, and because it doesn't get used as heavily as the other trucks, we're able to kind of repurpose that one, wait a little bit longer on it. We feel comfortable doing that versus purchasing an 8th truck to do all that.
Could you explain the reliability column? It says once every 2 months. Is that the times it's down?
That is the amount of times that it's in Casey's shop.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, as you can see, right, we have engine 2, which station 2 is my baby. That's where I spend a lot of time as a captain. But that engine, as you can see, there is a 5, which means it spends more than it's in Casey's shop more than twice a month, and it is a first out truck. So that's kind of like what the chief was saying, kind of the direness of some of our apparatus. After we took the initial presentation to the city manager and we talked about the Sourcewell stuff, we kind of were on hold for a little bit until approval came from the city commission that was something that we could move forward with, starting getting numbers and whatnot. So I believe that happened in, I want to say August or September. Does that sound right? So then we kind of got on it, went through Sourcewell, contacted 4 vendors that we either have apparatus of or came highly recommended from other departments that we visited with. One never contacted us back. One didn't meet our requirements of the information that we were wanting and some of the specifications that we wanted. So we were kind of left with 2 bids at the end of it. After that, then we kind of redid our numbers, came back in with our plan and our recommendation to the city manager. And as he kind of touched base on, in lieu of information that was kind of handed down to us last week that we didn't know about with the bond, and we did a lot of phone call and a lot of contacting over the Thanksgiving break, and very thankful to those vendors get back with us as soon as they did, but gave us some numbers, and so now we're essentially on hold again, waiting to see how the process ends up going as far as the finance. Kicking the cord as far as the financing portion goes. And I know there's a very part at the end for questions, but if you guys have questions at any time, right, like Mr. Davis did, please ask.
So when you're using Sourcewell, are we still picking the vendor of choice, or do they kind of do that for us by going through them as a cooperative? Or is a cooperative just for purchasing price, for pricing purposes?
Right. Okay.
So when we looked at Sourcewell and looked at the bid that they had put out, it's not a line-by-line specification bid. There are lines, but nothing like what would be if we had to do our own, from, how many spokes on your wheels and how big is the steering wheel and things like that. So they put it out for bid. Vendors all then bid. They will take them. If they decide to accept them, then they perform an evaluation internally through Sourcewell, and they rate them. So what we did was we had to look at a few things. One of the things was relative to location. Where are vendors that have apparatus that we could get service when we need it? We had to look at where they rated on their charts. There's some local that just weren't there. They weren't on there anymore. So it kind of takes it out of play. So we looked at a number of things. I also want to reiterate one thing when Chief Herzog was mentioning about these apparatus. Trust me when I tell you, we are not looking at Cadillacs. We are looking at basic apparatus, as basic as we can get, that will suffice and do us well. So I just want you to understand that this is not about, we're trying to get this. We want to kind of off the shelf as best we can because we're in that much of a dire need.
Yeah, as a little bit of clarification, cooperative purchasing, or what you might be familiar with cooperative purchasing, is, as Derek described earlier, a particular vendor may spec out something very, very clearly, put it out to bid and say, this is the lowest provider of, could be
Right.
office paper, or it could be a particular vehicle. Sourcewell is, their format is not to spec to that level of detail and identify one particular vendor. They'll identify a piece of equipment, they'll identify vendors that produce that equipment across somewhat of a range, so that they haven't dialed into one particular vendor, and then they will have the specs for that equipment and the pricing that goes with it. So that then gives you a little bit more latitude in terms of choosing a piece of equipment and the specifications that it meets. To Chief Snyder's point, historically, we wrote very detailed specs that were very customized. We're not going to be off-the-shelf manufactured and it'll be deliverable at the end of the year. It was, this will be the Salina Fire Department unit. When you place the order, we'll put you in the manufacturing schedule and it'll be customized down to the level of detail that Salina specified. By trying to use stock equipment and use Sourcewell, I told the fire department when I met with them previously, I appreciated their willingness to take this approach versus customizing to that level of detail from a cost-saving standpoint, from a flexibility standpoint, and from a time standpoint. So what they've then done is said, okay, vendor A and vendor B were responsive. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the key specs that those two vendors identified as their product.
And maybe this was said and I missed it, but, usually we'll spec something out and then we go out for bid, and if they meet the qualifications, we do low bid. How does this fall under the meeting the low bid requirements or whatever that we usually fall under?
It is an open solicitation from the vendors in terms of product and pricing, and then they are pre-qualified by Sourcewell as being, qualified and responsive. And then we end up looking at the pricing amongst those and selecting from one of those. Not necessarily, it could be the low, we could choose the low vendor, or we could say, making the side-by-side comparison, here's our choice, but we have a known price, versus we spec one piece of equipment, and in my past experience, spare tires and dome lights on trucks made a difference in pricing that he may not have intentionally left off the spec, but that could be the make or break between one truck and another. Not a fire truck, but just a regular truck. This has their specs and their pricing.
Does Sourcewell receive a commission from this, or where do they?
Yeah, if you go through Sourcewell, and I would have to do some double checking, but there is all of them, right? It doesn't matter if it's Sourcewell, HGAC, I'm trying to think what the one in Oregon is, but there is a fee per transaction. I want to, it's under $2,000, and I want to say that if I remember.
Yeah.
Right, assessed to the vendor, but I believe that it is if you do, if we buy 7 trucks through Sourcewell, it's a one-time deal, but it's assessed to the vendor, not to us. So it wouldn't be an extra expense.
Okay, and vendor A and vendor B, are they distributors of trucks or the actual manufacturer?
Manufacturers of trucks.
Okay.
They are the manufacturer, yeah.
So we would be dialing in on one manufacturer.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, they're the dealer. That's fair. Yeah, so they're the dealer.
They're dealers, and you can't go straight to any manufacturer pretty much. You have to go through a dealer one way or the other.
Right, it's like going along with MacArthur.
And-
You can't just
Yeah,
buy
we can't
Ford
go straight to
online. You
Ford. We have to
through-
go through a dealer. So what we've done, we have been in contact with the manufacturers to get some information, but the dealers are the folks who we're working more closely with, hand in hand with, to identify all of these particulars and put it together as relationship to cost, to support, to service support, to deliverable time frame. And that's how we kind of evaluated everything. There's much more to comparison of the vendors than just that, but those were the majors. And then there's a a full latitude or full group of minor ones that also have an impact.
I have a question regarding like expanding the capabilities. Like, I'm just kind of applying the logic of my other part of my work life, where sometimes I try and save money on a tool or whatever it may be, and I, in retrospect, go, well, I should have spent more money. The question I have is, if for some reason we get these in and you guys start using them and decide, well, there's some options we maybe should have looked at or checked the box on, are you able to expand on those, like, you know, buy something aftermarket or?
Correct, right. So, and it's twofold for us. So, the one vendor for sure we have visited with a little bit about, and Casey could probably expand on a little bit more. But there are, I want to say, like, I want to call them like bolt-in, right, additions, right? So, like in the cab, for say, we decide that because of VMS, you know, we need a little bit more cabinet space. They already have cabinets pre-made that fit inside of these given, because there's, again, I hate comparing to Ford all the time. I'm a Ford guy, so right. So we're not buying an XL. We're buying like an XLT, right?
Gotcha.
But we get the XLT and we decide, well, it really would have been nice to have leather or whatever, right? They have that ability to say, yep, we have those in stock. Casey can put them in. Casey also, knowing this, it has been coming for a couple of years, has upgraded equipment in his shop as far as fabrication. So there are some things that he can do to add into those as well. But they do have some plug-and-play capabilities.
Correct me if I'm wrong, there's a few add-on features that we can make the determination at the point that we place the order.
Yes. Let me do that one. So add-ons, each manufacturer, if we were to successfully go one or the other, one pretty much allows, let's say 10% of, hey, add-ons. The other one is only, or a number of this add-on, that's number one, number two, and only maybe 5, whatever it may be. If once you go past that, it now becomes a spec'd vehicle and you start from scratch. So what we did when we started this is one of the tasks the team had was to evaluate every truck in its class for storage space, for pumping capabilities, also to meet the requirements, but what we needed for storage, what we needed for hose capacity, again, also to meet NFPA, ISO, and everything else, and then go, this is what we need. Now, every one of them didn't have, you know, the foam capabilities. They have part of it in, but we have to put the tank in. So that's an add-on, and we know that. So one vendor came back and basically they put in the line and said, we estimate it's going to be less than this, but let's put $10,000 per vehicle in for the add-ons. For them, it's a piece of cake. For the other vendor, it might not be such a piece of cake. So, and not all the apparatus from one of the vendors can be off the shelf. Matter of fact, only 2 could be of all of them. So these are a lot of the considerations that as we go through, you'll see kind of what drove this.
Yeah. So, and to kind of drop a little more on that, we've done specs in the past, right? Like we've talked about, I mean, spec the heck out of these trucks before. And trucks, again, I'm going to go to Ford, right? When they build an XLT, when it goes down the line, there's some things you can add on pretty easy, right, by plug and play. However, there are some things that you may want that the manufacturer says, well, I can't add that, but the shop can, right? Or something like that. We have done that with Apparatus in the past, where this is kind of this is our truck, but we spec it because we want this, we have to have this. The truck wasn't designed for that and causes problems down the road for us, which is another reason why we've kind of like, let's back away from that and go to something kind of plain Jane to get away from some of those happenings and more maintenance costs on top of it as well.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And just on sidebar to that conversation, obviously Casey's a heck of a wrench if he's keeping a 35-year-old apparatus. Actually, multiple.
Absolutely, yes.
And by the way, hopefully you've got somebody that you're training, because at some point you're going to be retiring. So
I've already asked that question, and he has declined to answer when he's going to retire. So I don't have a plan for secession for him.
You've got time.
Yeah, but it's for him it's a specialized deal because the certifications it's pretty hard to find. It's not something that we can do internally. Like he actually came from the garage. I mean, within the city, already had the training and stuff, so it would be something like that versus fire department.
Gotcha.
So I'm repeating myself a bit, but the appreciation I expressed to the department was their willingness to take this more of a plain Jane, standardized spec approach versus have to write custom specs for every piece of equipment and getting beyond service to preference and then extending that timeline because it has to be manufactured and isn't on the line and can be purchased while it's under production. We have to get in the production run from the get-go, and there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained here, and it's a change in the way of thinking for the fire department. But, what they've done on these next slides is the items that they stressed and identified as being important. They've done a side-by-side comparison of those, and there are a few that are highlighted that one vendor may have and the other may not, and in a couple instances neither vendor has, and then it's a add-on that we'll have to address. So if you want to touch on any of the highlights of the specs, that would be good.
Right, so when we're looking at the specs, this is the first one. This is, we talked about the pump, right? This is the normal looking fire truck. As you'll see, vendor A and vendor B, right, can give us everything that we asked for. Vendor C is the one that they actually gave us prices of trucks in about 3 different colors and no information as to what is or is not on that truck. So all of our information had to come from a picture. So that's where we're at. And then vendor D was the one that never contacted us back. So on the next slide, okay, so back to the platform, which is the one with the bucket on it. Again, vendor A and vendor B are able to give us everything that we've asked for. And then, excuse me, on this one for the Quint, which is the one, the ladder truck without the bucket on it. The thing that we looked at is the 100-foot aerials. So currently our Quint and our backup Quint are 75-foot aerials. Our platform is 100-foot. Part of the reason that like I talked about, I think first slide, about looking at what fits the fire department and what fits the city of Salina. When I started, right, again, we had the one Quint. I don't know, a year or two later, I think we ended up with a second Quint. Had ladder, 75 feet. Sure seems like a really high reach when you think about 75 feet. When you go around town and consider 10 feet, which probably isn't quite enough for some of the buildings per floor, like Presbyterian Manor, 6 floors, if you can consider it 10 feet, which is probably a little bit more than that, you're talking 60 feet. That's great if we can park the truck right up next to it, right? But when you consider the setbacks, and at Tony's, the industrial areas downtown, you consider the setbacks, 75 feet doesn't quite cut it. Now, it can be good enough for rescues, right, like right off the ledge, but we're not getting up high enough to dump water towards the center of the buildings, especially when we start looking down south. And then we started using the ladders more. We used it on, where we got the other day? Had a house fire on 9th Street the other day, on 9th Street. So we're talking like 600 blocks, that sound right, John? 600 some odd block of South 9th Street, 2.5-story house. By the time you put 75-foot Quint up, because you got outriggers, by the time you set that up, we couldn't get it out to that house. And we're just talking 9th Street. That's not much of a setback for a residential place, so we had to bring the ladder in to be able to reach and do the work that we wanted to do with 100-foot. So, we think about the bigger buildings and the bigger capacity needed for that 100-foot, but even in the residential areas, we've been noticing that 75-foot's just not quite enough. And 100 is what we looked at for minimum, thinking that everybody made them. Apparently not everybody makes those in a Quint. And it's so the Quint, the other part that we didn't touch on is it's a single axle, right, which allows way more maneuverability through town, through residential streets, and the platform. It's got a tandem axle on it, so it's a little harder to turn with the bucket out front. It's just it's a monstrosity of a truck. But this vendor, theirs are actually 107 feet, so it'd be 30 feet more than what the competitor would offer for a 77-foot Quint. Obviously, that comes at a price. But again, trying to define the cost of an apparatus versus the cost of a house or a building or someone's life gets thrown into that as well. So, so that was the big difference there between vendor A and vendor B with the Quint. And then on the rescue truck, the very minimum, right? There's no pump on there for water, nothing really fancy. The biggest deal with the Quinn is enough horsepower to pull around all those heavy-duty tools to get around. So pretty simple there. So the next slide then. So this is the initial costs that we talked about, about. When we look at vendor A, unfortunately, these are estimates. They will not give us he didn't even use the word estimate. He used the word ballpark. So these are ballpark numbers. They are not, right, guaranteed numbers. In November 1st, that price went up. This is the price after November 1st, but November 1st, there was a 4% increase. We already know for sure from this vendor, January 1st, there's a 4.5% increase. Right, so you gotta add 4.5% to that top number for that one. So, right, the concern that we have is if that's the trend, every 3 months we're adding 4%. Doesn't take very long for that to start increasing pretty quick.
Yeah, I didn't. Real
Yep.
quick, I'd like to add to that also, when you look at the number of apparatus being 7, 2 of those apparatus, we could get that pricing on, to a point. The other 5 would require us to go to specs with them. We don't truly know the cost. So it's, again, ballpark as they put it. We asked the same question of everyone, but that's the way they put it, and that's the way they operate with it. So that becomes a timeline issue, and a cost issue.
Yep.
So how do you sort out emphasize the need for the 100-foot quint?
How do we sort it out? It just, like I said, we based it on call volume. We looked at
But if you went with vendor A, they can't do the 100-foot
No.
quint. But
that's correct.
you really want that, so how do you?
We
What's the
put our minimum, we decided, when you look back at what the minimum requirements were when we had the spec page up for the quints, we started, Chief Herzog and myself and Chief Pearson started the conversation about the 100-foot. I really felt the 100-foot was vital for us looking at the setbacks, and it was proven on that fire on 9th Street just a few weeks ago. I mean, that's for a private dwelling, let alone these huge buildings that are being done, that are already completed and some under construction, and how far we have, anything we can get that improves our reach, improves the service that we can provide to the community, and it's of value that probably you cannot quantify or quantify it. You just can't.
Yeah, I would add that these costs are subject to change in general. Then we have the 60-day protest period.
Yes.
So that's the reason we said we're going to need to pause a little bit. But the next slides are pros and cons of vendor A and vendor B. And I think you see ultimately we initially recommended vendor B for the reason of the ladder length as well as some other pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to do the best we can to give you a financial comparison as well as a pros and cons comparison for your consideration, knowing that we're going to have to go back and take another run at the financial numbers in light of that 60-day protest period.
Right. So to answer your question, right, that I'm not going to come to you with one vendor. If we'd have gone that route, right, in theory, there's only one vendor that we contacted that can do the 100-foot, but it's probably not fair to come to you with one option.
I guess that's kind of my question
So, right.
is if the 100-foot quint's a must-have.
Right. So
Does
there's
that-
always the option of cutting those out. Right. So we could do the 100-foot quints from this manufacturer and other apparatus from another manufacturer if that is something that you guys decided
You're not just going
to
to be
do
locked
instead.
into vendor A and B.
Yeah, I would say what we can, we'll do our best to try to quantify that to a dollar value
There-
to help you as the governing body make the decision of
Yeah, so there's-
is that extra length worth it? But I think from staff's perspective, we think that it is.
Right. And there's some numbers that we'll get to a little bit too that because of time frame of trucks and what vendors can and can't do, you start adding cost because of time, you get right, this gets closer to that. So but yeah, that's a good question. If I don't answer it better, just let me know. So if we move to the next one, then we got pros and cons of vendor A. So obviously looking at the last one, the one that sticks out is just the overall price, right? The difference in the price. With vendor A, like we talked about, they have 2 trucks that they do stock. So if we were to purchase those trucks, especially if we wait for the 60-day deal for the bond, if we go that route, we're looking at that we could get those trucks by the first quarter of 25-ish to get those. A concern with some of that on the pro of getting those pumpers that quick is depending upon the amount of additions that we want to this truck, there's a possibility that those stock trucks become spec trucks. And now instead of 10 or 12 months, now we're looking at 450 to 600 days. So there's a possibility. I wouldn't say it's very likely, but there's a possibility that happens. And then you got to throw your inflation pieces back into that. They do have the ability to make changes, kind of like we talked about with our specs, right? Some of the things that we know that we want and or need to make those changes. The group that they are in, they do have consolidated production under one parent organization. So this vendor, again, to use for my simple mind, Lincoln, Mercury, Ford, right, all fall under Ford, right? So this is kind of where vendor A is at. They have a group of different manufacturers that are owned by a parent company. So the bonus is that all of that equipment comes from a parent company. The issue that we have had with that in the past, which is another reason why we like vendor B, but Casey has had the issue of this chassis, right, came from this part of the organization. This ladder came from this part of the organization. The cab comes from this part of the organization. And the chassis says, no, that's on the cab. The cab says, no, that's on the ladder. Ladder says, no, it's on the, and we sit and spin, right, and can't get parts, get anything done. It's different when it's not warranty work. It's just Casey ordering a part, but when things are under warranty and you play the game, you start talking more and more time out of service, it becomes a hassle.
That in turn affects resale. The more you customize it, I take it.
The more you customize it, it can affect resale a little bit. We did do some research on some resale, just unofficial because we're not great at those things. But a certain vendor, when you look at, because it's hard to compare, right? When you're looking at a 20-year-old truck, what they did 20 years ago and trying to compare different ones, it's kind of hard. But vendor B's resale value was actually anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 more per truck. And that same, we looked from anywhere from like 17 to 23 years of used trucks that are selling. So when they come to the end of our time, kind of get a ballpark, of what that would be. But yeah, some of those additions can affect your resale.
Yeah, but
So one and a perfect example of that, we have our backup Quint currently. That manufacturer is no longer in business, right? So that truck, when we sell it, is going to be pennies on the dollar because we can't get parts for it. Casey goes on eBay or manufactures those parts for that truck because they're just not there. So is a key cog, I think, again, going forward, that you have something that you can sell, right? Not the stuff that I start making out of my garage next week so I can make money, Nobody's going to buy that, and I'm not going to be around in 20 years to make parts for it. So
Well,
definitely
I assume
something to consider.
if we get to this level in this program, then we're going to have the wisdom to change our trucks a little sooner. Like we're
Right.
going to rotate.
Correct. So
and
this is that's an excellent point. So this plan, when it was presented as a 10 and 20 plan, so these trucks would go into a first due or first out service for 10 years. And then at 10 years, they would move to backup. At 20 years, sold and out the door. So 10 years from now, we'd be doing the same process, 10 years, so that we keep the flow going. Correct.
Yeah, I'm looking for dependable strategy here.
Right. Yep. That is the plan. Yep. Now, I can tell you that Of course, who knows what happens in 10 years with, if we add a fire station or anything like that. But if things stay current, right, we would be able to, I think this 10-year would be 7 this year. And because of the hazmat truck, because of currently its amount of use would be a 20-year truck. So in 10 years from now, we'd be looking at 6 trucks, right? And then 20 years from now, we'd be back to 7 and going back and forth between those.
I follow.
Yeah, versus what we've done in the past, right? Which is I need 1, I need 2, I need 1, I need 3, I need.
And that was presented
boom,
in the
boom.
capital improvement plan, that a 25-year plan on vehicle costs on an annual basis. And then when certain vehicles, like after this year, when the next purchase would be, for what vehicles, and we went all the way out to 25 years. And then we looked at the purchasing options and looked at best options, or what I felt to present to the city manager's office, and working with Debbie and working together, really, all of us, to see how we can do this. So the plan is out there. It's in the capital improvement budget plan that we did meet on, and I know it was a while ago, so I don't remember the numbers either, but the plan is there.
Yeah,
It's there.
And to add to your point about the resale, so some of those conversations we did have with other departments, and looking at other departments and looking at warehouses that sell used fire trucks, that it's like cars, right? You get to that, it's about a 15, right? That resale really kind of starts dropping. So it's trying to find that happy medium of when should we get rid of it because it's no good to us anymore, versus how long can we hold on to it to try and get some sort of value to help replace. So that's why we stuck with the 20, and it's easier math. I like easy, so 10, 20, instead of everything in between. To the service part, this vendor has offered 2 techs for warranty work, anywhere from 24 to 48 hour response. And they did offer sending our EVT to class to be certified under this manufacturer to do warranty work. So he could do maybe a lot of the things anyway in-house versus having to ship it out. So a definite bonus there. The big con to this vendor, outside of those 2 stock trucks, if we can keep them stock and not have to go specs, is they're looking anywhere from 450 to 600 days after contract. So this vendor, because of those, now we're talking specs. So the earliest we could get with him is the first of the year. Then we're looking, about 3 months or so going through individual specs for all these trucks. So like I mentioned before, now we're 3 months into another possible inflation increase. So, and then 450 days to 600 days after that to get the apparatus in. And then as we kind of visit about, right, the quint size, it's only 77 feet instead of the 100 foot quint. The upcharges, some of the concerns that we have, after the first of the year, due to EPA, Cummins is no longer allowed to make L9 motors. So if we don't get them purchased before then, or if they're not spoken for before then, it automatically jumps up to an 11 or 12.
It's an X10, it's a brand new engine.
10, okay, so it's their brand new one of an X10, and talking to the vendors, that is a guaranteed upcharge of at least $60,000 for the engine, plus whatever the transmission costs to line up with it, other modifications they may have to make with that. Part of the concern that we also have with those is, because it's new and they're coming into it, is fitting the cab on top of a new motor, right? They've spent all this time on cabs. They haven't. They're trying to hold off, and rightfully so, to do as many of the L9s as they can. But there's going to be some cab configuration changes. Whether or not that fits into, again, if that pushes us into a spec or not, I'm not sure. But knowing that we have that additional cost to add to the engines at a minimum, and I think the recommendation for the quints, because they have the smaller ones, is to go to a bigger one, which makes sense because of the extra weight of the ladder on top. And then, as it's noted on there, right, the inflation costs due to time frame. So if this manufacturer continues with what they're looking at, we're talking 4% a quarter, starts adding on pretty quick until the day of contract. So, questions on vendor A? Okay, vendor B. Pros. So all trucks by the first quarter of 2025. because they are stock trucks and they are currently holding them for us until February, right? February 15th. Until February 15th. They're already in production. And the things that we want are things that can be added on, like I talked about with trucks again, with pickups again, right? You can send the truck through, and you can build an XL or an XLT, just depends on what you plug here or there. So that's kind of what these stock trucks do. They got their line. Some of the things we want added, they're already plumbed for. It's just a matter of adding that after it gets off the line. So we're looking at should have these by the first quarter of 2025 if we choose this vendor. Again, same as vendor A, the ability to make changes. Most of the changes are already in these quotes, and this vendor has a $10,000. Trying to think how to put it, but they already have a $10,000 contingency for some changes built into these prices. So the price for vendor B already has $10,000 built into each truck for changes that we would want. If there's no additional changes, then it's $10,000 off, but it's already built into their price for a few things here and there. As far as the service, they have 12 techs versus the 2 to 4, or versus the 2, and they do have a 24-hour response. They do the same thing. They would send our EVT to class to be certified to do the warranty work. And then if it ends up being a long-term issue with the truck that is warranty, they will give us a replacement truck. So while it's under warranty, that's a huge bonus that, for whatever reason, transmission fails, whatever, right? It's a warranty piece. We would get something in its place. Maybe not exactly what we had, but something in its place to make it work until we got our truck fixed. With the consolidated production, this vendor, everything is under the same company. They are a single company. Ladders, trucks, cabs, chassis, everything is made by them. It's not 3 different manufacturers sitting on a truck. It is a single truck.
Can you name the manufacturer? I'm trying to think of fire truck companies.
Well, that's up to the city manager. If he wants me to, that's fine. If
We're
not,
trying to remain objective by not naming them and
Yes.
just kind of giving you the information in kind of this format. Ultimately, it'll come down to that, but don't want to jade anybody by brand or reputation necessarily.
You mentioned warranty. Do both vendors A and B have typically the same?
They're
same
exactly
warranty?
the same warranty. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep. So then, the 100-foot quints that we've talked quite a bit about. The price certainty, which we just kind of touched on. This price is for vendor B is locked in until February 15th. They have promised not to change anything on us or take away the trucks. In this process, we've seen trucks like, this is what we're looking at, this is what we want, we agree with these, this would be great, and then 2 days later, they're sold. Okay, well, it's the next one up. Well, the next one up is $50,000 more. The next one up is, right, so, but a little bit of price certainty with those, and then we discussed the resale a little bit about, this vendor has additional resale value, looking at the wholesale trucks and the warehouses that are selling them. Whether that ever amounts to anything, it's hard telling. We wouldn't know for 20 years when these trucks actually get sold, but the potential is there. And then one thing that we found out that we actually really liked about these trucks that we didn't know about, they have panoramic windshields. So when I talk about panoramic windshield, we're talking like in your personal vehicles, right? You can see all the way through your windshield. All the other vendors have like a semi,
Round,
right,
not through.
has got a bar right in the middle that detracts from sight. I didn't drive trucks very long, but I drove them enough to know that it doesn't take much for that little 2-inch piece in the middle of your windshield to really throw you off when you're driving. So that was an added bonus that we weren't aware of until we really started digging into the specs that they sent out. The big con, obviously, is that initial overall price, right? It's a lot more expensive than vendor B. Vendor A, sorry. And then there's this cost avoidance, which is some of the stuff on the next slides. This is due to the speed of which we could get these apparatus through vendor B. So I don't know how well you can see it. I don't know how well I can see mine, but so the first, knowing that So the blue, if you can see the blue, is for the engines. So the engines are a possibility of stock through vendor A. So knowing that that's going to take 12 months, maybe 15, depending upon, when contracts are signed and all that jazz. We left those up there because that's going to be the same cost regardless of which vendor we go with. Also, through that first 12 to 15 months, right, those costs are going to be the same regardless of which vendor we go with because we don't have the trucks to replace them yet. By the time you get to month 15 and definitely down to 21 months and longer if we end up having to, you can see that it's for our maintenance costs on those trucks that we're looking to replace. This is not our backup trucks. These are trucks that we are looking to replace. We're spending almost $25,000 a quarter on maintenance issues on our first out trucks. So for every quarter that we're waiting past that 12 months of vendor B, that's an additional cost that is possibly there if you, on vendor A, right, to a point.
How does warranty work get taken care of?
So that'd be great. That's a Casey question. Step on up.
And go ahead and state your name and.
Casey Stevenson, I'm the mechanic and kind of the head of our maintenance division. We have two options currently. We can either, three actually, we can have a technician from the company come out to our facility and repair our vehicles, or if it's serious enough, we can arrange for the vehicle to be sent to their factory for repair. Usually what we do, they authorize me to make a factory repair. We can do it in the maintenance shop, and then we just bill them accordingly for the shop's time.
And we bill them.
Yes.
Perfect, okay.
Which trucks do you prefer working on, vendor A's or vendor B's?
We have both. We currently have 5 different manufacturers in our lineup of apparatus.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you do have a preference of having all the same versus having a mixture.
That was my next question.
As far as the maintenance portion is concerned, a single source would definitely be the way to go, just because the shop doesn't have to stock parts for 5 different kinds of vehicles. So it makes it a lot easier. Lowers the downtime because we can usually have more items on hand as necessary. So as far as A and B, I probably better keep my mouth shut on that, but that's our option.
You guys are good
in
at
your
this.
opinion, is there a significant difference between A and B?
Concerning availability of parts or just ease of
Quality or
So
yeah,
How about
reliability?
Well-
Because that would be the
So industry standards and our own SFD data indicates that vendor B's apparatus have a more dependable and longer service life with less repair. And that's
right. To Casey's
put it.
to
Trying to be
Casey's
careful
point,
here.
our oldest apparatus that are still in service that we still use, seems like almost daily we got one of them in service because something else is broken down, is vendor B.
And I realize it seems odd to be referring to them as vendor A and vendor B. We don't necessarily have to do that. But in a typical competitive bid process, you'd send specs out, they'd all submit at the same time, and then we'd be making a side-by-side comparison. I would really like us to make an objective determination, so if whichever vendor isn't chosen, can see our conversation and see that it's based on objectives, not brand.
Right. Not subjective to. Yep. To
all
the fact
three
that I
of
like
our-
Fords
of our
better.
current backup vehicles were produced by vendor B. So,
Yep.
any other questions I can answer for you guys?
Thank you, Casey.
All right. Yep. So the last point that on this slide, depending upon how much longer it would take to get all of the apparatus from vendor A versus vendor B, we're looking at an additional cost of $100,000 to $150,000 in maintenance, waiting that additional time, or that additional time frame. On the next one, we've got the inflation cost by put it in there by millions. So if you see the .23, right, that's $230,000 for my simple brain. These are like easy numbers, so these are easy numbers. These aren't right. $276,272.15. It doesn't matter for this conversation. So they're in there nice and easy. But this is the concern of the 4% increase. So at 3 months, right, that's roughly $230,000 increase. Well, actually, excuse me, $230,000 per quarter. At that 4% increase, if that manufacturer continues with that inflation piece every 3 months. So again, knowing that it's going to take us at least that first quarter to get through specs with that one, that's an additional cost to vendor A. And then on the next one, just to kind of put it a little bit in perspective as far as build time in months, we do have it listed out there by vendor A's pumpers, platform, quints, rescues, and then vendor B's pumpers, platform, quints, and rescues. As you can see again with vendor A, that's given the fact that it does not have to be spec'd out, that we can keep it as a stock truck, and then it will be that 12-month-ish time frame. And everything with vendor B, right, we're looking at that 12-month time frame. With the platform, quints, and rescues, knowing that they have to go to spec with vendor A, we're looking at 20 months from time of contract. So if we consider time of contract March or April of 24, then we're looking almost 2 years out from that. Looking to maybe maybe the end of 25, probably more like the first part of 26 before we would get those trucks.
And vendor A will not fix their prices in the meantime. I mean, they won't lock in, correct?
Correct, yeah, right. They will not lock in, yeah. Yeah, we already know that they're going up 4.5% first year after their 4% increase in November. The next slide. So these are some issues that we came across that we know we're going to have to do some work with. The first one there with the industry standards and best practices, and with our rescue trucks, we're still using hydraulic tools for our jaws of life, if that makes sense there, buddy. To cut people out of cars, still using hydraulic. The electric market has come along tremendously. I mean, just taken off. Their power is equivalent to that of the hydraulics. So we are, with our trucks that we spec'd for the rescue trucks, no hydraulics on them. So we're looking at upgrading to the electric jaws of life and those types of tools. So that alleviates a cost, right, coming off that rescue truck. We don't have to worry about putting in a hydraulic pump. We don't have to worry about having in a large generator to run some of those things. And then we're not tied to 100 foot of the truck. We can take that tool wherever we want off that truck and use it. But we also know it's going to come at a cost, and that'll be something that the team will be getting. It'll be a different team. It'll be the rescue team or the rescue committee coming with the CIP project for next year, so that we can start purchasing those hopefully in 2025. In the meantime, we do have enough of the portable hydraulic tools that we can put on on these new rescue trucks to still accommodate and do the things that we are currently doing. But this will alleviate some of the maintenance for Casey. We don't have those issues on the truck. Again, just kind of to the city manager's point, simple. Keep it simple, a lot easier to go forward. So, and then we talked about the EPA stuff. So we know that cost is coming. Huh? Oh, sorry. And then the third one, right, we've talked about again, the longer we wait, the higher the overall cost as the inflation continues to go up. And then on the next one is the recommendation, like city manager kind of talked about. This is where we thought we were until some things got thrown in our way last week with prices and stuff. So this will come at a different time of what the recommendation will be and how the plan is to pay for it. So, and then the rest of it's for Debbie.
So I just wanted Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. Real quick, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail because as we've talked about a lot, the numbers are moving every day. But I just did want to assure you that, one, we've prepared for this. We have it in our plan. There are a lot of options that are very confusing, but I'll spell those out for you real quickly. But those are not decisions we'll be making today. So basically, as Mike had mentioned, we did, as part of our 10-year capital improvement plan, we did include the replacement of apparatus. We put them in there as a lease, but we knew we were going to debt finance them. We knew we wouldn't be able to come up with $9 million in cash to replace these things in 1 year. So we knew that was going to be a long-term financing source. The source in the financial plan, as part of the budget process, we came forward to you with the financial plan, and as part of that, on this slide, this is our famous slide that nobody can read because it's so small, is the sales tax capital fund projections and things like that. So what we did in the capital improvement plan is, with everything that we did in that improvement plan, we included that in here as reimbursement or as an allocation for those plans. So vehicles and equipment, parks maintenance, all of those things were included in here at the rate that they put in the 10-year plan. And once we did that, we realized that with the sales tax, what it's doing, we had the ability to set aside funds for this plan as well. So as you can see in the very second to the last column, we kind of set aside $1.2 million for the first 5 years for fire apparatus replacement, and then about $1.3 million in the last 5 years of a 10-year period. And we projected that we would still have available fund balance in that sales tax fund. Now, the assumptions at the time were about 4.5% increase in 2023 and about a 4.4% increase in 2024. That growth is a little bit lower than we anticipated right now, which is about 3.8%, about $95,000. But even with that number, I think that this plan is still workable. The years beyond that, we only used 0.5% increase, which is very, very conservative in our planning process. So I think those numbers are still viable, even with the number not being exactly where we thought it would be. And the fire staff has mentioned this, but there are some other financial considerations that we're taking into consideration. These numbers will be a little bit different because the pricing's a little bit different. Vendor B, both vendors offer a prepayment discount, so that if we prepay up front when we sign the contract, they will give us a discount. Vendor B has said that if we pay by 12/31 of 23, they'll give us that full discount. Currently, it's about $348,000, and after that time, it's a prorated discount. So we would get a discount, but it wouldn't be at the full amount. Vendor A didn't give us a specific amount, thought that amount might be about $270,000. At the time we printed this, we thought there'd be a cost increase on February 1st. However, vendor B has come back and said, we'll hold these prices till February 15th, knowing you have to go through this whole 60-day process, and that day should put you around February 6th. So they were willing to hold that price cost until February 15th. Also on this slide, I just wanted to give you the timeline. At today's commission meeting, we are going to be bringing forward an action item to authorize the publication and notice of intent to issue bonds for this particular project. We have to then publish that in the paper for 2 weeks, and then the protest period begins after the second publication, which puts us out to about February 6th of 2024. That last line is not accurate anymore because they came back and said that was good through 12/31. The next slide kind of gives you the options. So there's a lot of things going on here. We can prepay, we can issue bonds, we can finance through capital leases, we can not prepay, we can do those things. If we choose, and that's the direction we were going, was to do bonds, then that 60-day period would come into play. So we tried to give you all the options. We could prepay out of general fund dollars and reimburse ourselves for that. But in doing so, I think that assumes that we've going through with that contract, so that we don't have the voice of the people yet. So we were just trying to give you those options, and if you have any questions on that, we can answer that. But like I said, that's not really a decision that we're asking you to make today. The next slide kind of broke out the numbers as they were last week, just to give you a comparison of each option where it was. as far as whether we'd issue bonds, whether we'd prepay, and how much that saved us, and things like that. So as we get these numbers tied down a little bit more in the next couple of weeks, we'll bring this back to you so that you can have an idea what those numbers really look like. The pros and cons of each of these options. The pros of one and not prepaying anything and not doing anything until we sign that until we get through that 60-day protest period is that we're not committing to a contract. So that we're not committing to having to do anything until we know that protest period's taken out of there. And if we go through option A and do bonds, it's a lower interest rate. The cons would be that we do lose that cash discount, and we could possibly incur a cost increase on February 15th if we went beyond that date. And then there's just, you have to look at all those options and the benefits of the cost of the discount and the savings of the bonds and things like that. I'm not going to go through all those numbers because we're really kind of aren't going that direction at this point, but I certainly would answer any questions if you have it, as far as what we're able to do today, if we wanted to do something today.
There is one option in there that we identified and questions have come up about that I want to address, and that is, rather than bond financing, we could lease finance. We'd essentially be going through a financing company or a bank and taking out a loan instead of bonds. That technically may not, then fall under the 60-day protest period. Conceptually, it's not any different. It's debt. It's an ongoing debt commitment similar to bonds, and then it does carry with it a higher interest rate. I only say that because if you, as the governing body, said this is urgent and we want to expedite it, that's the only method that we have been able to identify that would allow any definitive decision in advance of that 60-day protest period. Having said that, kind of see from staff's perspective, we would acknowledge that it kind of seems like an end around on the protest period and the provisions that are there in the statute.
Yeah, city
That's
manager.
maybe 3%.
I'm sorry.
The difference in bonding and a lease might be 3%.
Percentage-wise,
Not even that at this point. I mean, we've got some semi bids about 5.1% for a lease and 4.25 with cost of issuance on bonds, because you do pay an additional cost to issue bonds. So it's about 4.25. So it's about a 1% difference.
Two things. One, if they're willing to hold their price, right now we have an inverted yield curve, so there's a chance that interest rates could actually go down by
Yes.
February. I mean,
Yes.
there's always that chance they could go up. But
Yep.
Getting back to what City Manager Scraggs said, the leasing, we talked about that a little bit, and to do that feels like we're circumventing that 60-day protest period, and I'm not comfortable with that.
I will say the statute does not require you to do that if you capital lease, and a lot of cities do that. They went out and asked, a lot of cities do that. They just automatically capital lease it, they don't bond it, which is allowable, but you're right. It doesn't take it out and go through that protest period.
This cash discount at the time of signing the contract, is that paying in full?
Yes. So we'd be paying the $9 million in full, which would be coming out of reserves somewhere, probably our general fund reserve, and then we would reimburse ourselves
Once
once
we got
we
the
issued
bonding.
bonds or did a capital lease. Yeah. We might be able to get a capital lease in place by the end of the year, if we started very quickly, but we could also reimburse ourselves.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, Debbie.
No, I'm done. That was all. I wasn't going to go through the whole pros and cons unless they had specific questions.
So, Commissioners, there's a lot of information there. There obviously is a lot of effort as well, but number one, we're deviating from the spec one piece of equipment at a time, customized to Salina specifics, and then put it out to bid and run that entire timeline. So that's a deviation from past practice. Sourcewell, it kind of dovetails into that in terms of using them as a cooperative purchasing agent, but as I described previously, That is different vendors, similar products, a side-by-side comparison, and a selection amongst them versus just a straight-up sealed bid process. Now, having said that, I think they all know that they're going to be exposed to a lot of purchasers through the Sourcewell process, so they're trying to put their best foot forward in terms of pricing. And then we have the timing of the protest period. So I throw all that out there to kind of solicit your feedback of any questions, concerns you might have, or whether there's consensus going forward as we've described.
And we have about 5 minutes, I guess, for questions and answers here before we need to break before the actual meeting. But I guess, where does this fit in long-term as far as replacing property, replacing this equipment over time? Does this help us to,
Number one, it levels out.
and it levels out, we
Which
don't
is
have
always our
this,
goal.
which we talked about
Yeah.
with the leasing, right?
Yeah. Either way, whether we bond finance the whole fleet and then do it in 10 years and replace what we need to do in those backup items in 10 years, then that, as Herzog said, we do 7 now, in 10 years we do 6, then we do 7, then we do, so it's just a repetitive process that we're setting ourselves up for.
Setting herself up so we can keep better equipment, and
Yep.
Casey won't have a job one of these days because we're gonna have all new equipment. Don't think that's
He'll
gonna happen.
always have a job.
Yeah, he does have job
Does this
security.
fully equip the future Station 4?
So, well, he may have a different answer, but with the quint, right, with that additional quint, like we talked about, versus going with 3 pumpers, the additional quint would be at Station 4 where it used to be. So it doesn't, I mean, it fully equips it to the capabilities that it is currently at.
It'll assist us in a little, in more points in the optics for our ISO point system. It wouldn't be enough to take us to a 1, but it definitely is a help, and it's the right thing to do. So, yeah, and the plan, like I said, we had presented this for 25 years and looking at it overall, so all those factors, yes.
I kind of like the direction we've taken, trying to level out our expenses over time. We're doing that by leasing vehicles and stuff. I think it's going to make it easier for future commissioners down the road to not have to deal with some of the things we've had to deal with over the last.
Yeah, I agree with that. Coming out of COVID, we tasked the city manager with doing these very things, and he's brought the vehicle program forward, and this is another step in the right direction. So commend him, and thank you guys for all the work that you put into this. It makes a lot of sense.
Any other questions for staff?
All right, as Debbie mentioned, we have an action item on your agenda today, and I think that gives us confirmation to continue in the direction we're headed. We will get with the vendors. There was a lot of conversation in a short amount of time, give them an opportunity to kind of verify we have all the same information from them. We'll make a side-by-side comparison. If something significantly changes and we think that action is necessary before year end, we'll come back. But the premise is we have vendor B indicating they'll hold prices into February, let that 60-day protest period run, and we will make the preparations to hit the ground running just as soon as we get to day 61.
I get it, that time is money.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. We'll see everybody back here at 4. Okay, it is 4 o'clock, and I will call the November 27th, 2023 Salina City Commission meeting to order. I will first look to staff for confirmation the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, may we have a roll call?
Mayor Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Lankowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Will those who are able please stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have no awards or proclamations, so that will bring us to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 4.1, public hearing for the issuance of $35 million in taxable industrial revenue bonds and approval of resolution number 23-8167 for Salina Destination Development, LLC.
Okay, I will open the public hearing and turn this over to Mr. Hennessy or Mr. Robinson. I don't know who's going first.
Sean Hennessy, Assistant City Manager. What we're bringing before you today is a request for $35 million in taxable industrial revenue bonds. I'll give you a little bit of history on this. I know you all are familiar with this apartment complex, and you'll actually be seeing it a number of additional times when you think about the annexation and the rezoning and everything else. But just for some background, this is part of an ongoing efforts in the city of Salina to provide housing. We've seen an ongoing growth in terms of a number of employers and that need for housing. So the city has taken a number of steps to really induce housing and to provide incentives. This has included RHIDs, moderate income housing, and otherwise. We were very fortunate in order to be able to get through legislation in the Kansas legislature a $25 million grant to assist with housing to support jobs that are continuing to develop in the Salina area. After we got this, we then initiated an RFP process, and as a result of that process, we had 13 responses. We then had narrowed it down to 4. The city commission, as you remember, interviewed them, and we selected Salina Destination Development to go forward with this project. The project where we're at right now originally was envisioned for 500 units. We still are seeking that to be the goal. However, this for phase 1 is only involving 250 units. And these will be exclusively 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. If you go ahead and pull up the map, this just gives you an idea. I wanted to give you, if anybody who's not real familiar with it, this is 135 going north to south. The blue border is the parcel that we are talking about. Menards is the large building there between the parcel and 135. Right now, if you go ahead and go to the next slide, this is the parcel, and on the right you'll see where the phase 1 development will be going in. The intent is for phase 2 for the additional 250 units to go onto this parcel, but we don't know for certain that that will be the case, because even though there's quite a bit of a land left, you have issues with flood zones and otherwise. However, this is the location within the parcel that we're looking at for the phase 1 development of those 250 apartments. We did sign a development agreement with the Salina Destination Development, LLC. That agreement has went into effect earlier this month. We've started the process, actually literally as we're speaking. We're trying to get the wire transfers taken care of in order to complete the closing for this parcel. It's taken us a little bit of extra time to get the state to submit the reimbursement money, but that's kind of the status and where we're at now. This request itself is for, as I indicated, IRBs. This includes 10-year real property tax abatement, as well as a sales tax exemption for the construction materials on this site. This phase one is going to be a roughly $35 million project. The phase one with phase two will be a roughly $65 million project. I say roughly because, as you just heard in the last study session, these prices are constantly subject to change, but those are the prices we're looking at right now. What we've done is, and Mitch Robinson will be here to talk about what SKIDO, the actions they've undertaken, and the economic analysis. As part of this request for IRBs, the goal is to really further incentivize and to make sure we get this housing that has been needed. The DA actually envisions the process of going through the IRB issuance to be completed within 45 days after the signing of the DA. We're well within that timeline. There has been, due to the fact that the annexation is not completed and will not complete until December, we're going to request the county tomorrow, and they're going to hear it, to approve this also. Again, remember, this land is currently not within the city limits. The annexation process has initiated. Because that is the case, you have to either have the county's approval of this, or you have to wait until after the annexation is complete. The annexation won't be complete until mid-December, although it has been initiated. But that's why we're going to seek the county's approval, and they will actually be hearing this tomorrow for the issuance of the IRBs for their approval. I have, like I said, Mitch Robinson. I believe Sarah Steele with Gilmore and Bell is online. If you have any questions, this project does envision 9 permanent jobs. There would be 7 jobs in the first development of the project. These would be positions such as maintenance, such as leasing agents, et cetera. And then in years 2 and 3, there would be 1 additional job. So that would be 9 permanent jobs. That obviously does not address all of the construction jobs that would be in place for this project. It's going to be obviously a very large construction project. Particularly if phase 2 commences at the same time, there will be literally a lot of dirt flying in order to be able to develop these units. As I indicated before, this is for 250 apartments. These will be 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. This is for phase 1. Phase 2, we're envisioning a different mix of units. However, that has not been decided. That will be coming back to you for your approval at a later point in time. This is just for the phase 1 request for the 250 apartments, 1 and 2 bedroom. Mitch, if you want to talk a little bit about the SKIDO action. And
Yes, sir. Mitch Robinson, Executive Director of Salina Economic Development. It's a pleasure to be here tonight on this exciting project that the community has worked on for so long, and we're getting to that point where we'll be seeing some dirt move very quickly, and we're all looking forward to that. I know the companies in the community are still talking to us about the need for housing, and this is going to be a huge plus, along with all the other that's already going on here in the community. So we never want to forget about those homes that are already under construction, and many of them have been sold. Our process, as you all well know, the Salina Community Economic Development Organization will review all industrial revenue bond projects and come and make a recommendation to the City Commission, either in support or against. Obviously, this is a project that we've worked on and been involved in from some extent for well over a couple of years now. So on Thursday, November 16th, the Board of Directors met for their monthly meeting, and Mark Abbott, Mark is here with the Polsinelli firm out of Kansas City, who's representing SDD. He outlined the project for us, told us pretty much all the details. The city manager and Mr. Hennessy were also at the meeting and went into all the details that the board is interested in hearing about. And as we went through that, we talked about the economic impact. And today, Mr. Hennessy and I had a discussion about that we felt like something was left out, and we went back and looked at it. So you should have received an updated version number 4 from Wichita State's Center for Economic Development and Business Research. And what had been left out was just the sales tax amount for the materials used in the construction of the building. So I'll point that out here. But on the first page, it's pretty much the basic information on the project. The land that's purchased is at $500,000. The building and improvements will be, as Sean pointed out, $34 million. And then there's an additional $500,000 in furniture, fixtures, and equipment that's being included in the project. The amount of taxable materials is at $17 million, the city and the county. So those are the two numbers that were left out. But we were very fortunate that it really did not impact the analysis on the project. If we go over to page 8, you get into a little bit more detail on the job numbers, the payroll. They get into the construction numbers of the jobs, which we're looking at direct jobs of 280, and with total jobs of over 500. Payroll is going to be a direct 17 million, with an additional 27, almost 28 million total. And the multiplier is well over almost 2% at 1.81. So you look at those impact, and we've seen over the years when we've had large construction projects, Swans, for example, the sales that goes on within the community, we'll see that. You'll be able to see that in the numbers that impact the community. So that's again very positive. And then if you look down the bottom of page 9, the next page, and we get into the abatement amounts, the city abatement is a little over 2.5 million. The county's a little over 3.3 million. And then you get into state at 1.8, school system is at 1.9 million. And those are the tax abatement. And then on the sales tax for the construction material, again, this is the number that was not included, 378,000 and some change for the city, a little over 97,000, almost 98,000 for the county, and then the state, which has the bigger number. And then you go down, continuing down, and you see the impact of $12,500,000. That's half of the $25 million that the state of Kansas, through the Department of Commerce, has provided as an incentive to the community. That's where that number is factored into. So you can see your totals, and we come down, as you all well know, we look at the benefit cost ratio and the ROI numbers that are always important to the evaluation of these projects. And these ROI numbers are really very high. If you look at the over a 20-year, especially when the units really play major factors, you're looking at over 70% for the city and the county on those numbers.
Which page are you on there, Mitch?
This is page 9,
Okay.
bottom of page 9.
I was looking for this. Okay.
City, county, and state across the. It's page 9 on mine, so I hope it's page 9 on yours.
Is
So-
that the 70,
I got 2 sets of
72?
My pages got the hole punched.
Okay. Yeah,
Well, the
so
page
that's
number
where you
is-
got the 72.7%? ROI?
70.3% over a 20-year period on the
My
ROI.
number's a little different.
Yeah. And then the benefit cost ratio for this is version 4. This is the updated version.
Yeah, here we go.
The cost benefit ratio for the city came in at 1.08. Version 3, the previous version, had been at 1.10, so just a slight change. The 1.70 for the 20-year period had been previously 1.83, so again, just a minor change. For some reason, the county number stayed exactly the same at 1.02, and then the 20-year number came in at 1.73. The state, because of their major investment in the project, came in at a very low 0.32 for the 10-year period. And then if you flip over, maybe flip over to your information, you can look at the school district. The school district is the other impact. They have 1.34 for both version 3 and version 4. So you look at those numbers again, no real change, just when we go back and include that sales tax number on your construction materials.
And it is important to note that the state number is very low, but if you'll see that's because of the $12.5 million grant that was is counted essentially against their score. So that's the reason why their score is exceptionally low at 0.4, because that $12.5 million grant is counted against their overall score.
Or counted for it, depending on how you look at it. So at that point, the Board of Directors, we discussed this a little bit more. Again, as I said earlier, we had all the questions answered. So there was a vote that was taken, 6-0, to recommend to the City Commission that we approve the 10-year abatement, that you approve the 10-year abatement, and the tax abatement on the materials for the construction materials, and the what's normally called FF&E, which is the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So at that point, I'm here to answer any questions. But we're very excited about the progress that's been made and the future we're going to see out there. It's going to have a major impact on our community.
Okay, questions from commissioners? I'll look to my left.
None.
My question is, usually when we look at these, it's direct jobs with a business. So when you're talking about the 280 jobs direct, is that jobs that will come in because of the housing?
Those are the construction jobs.
Okay,
Those are
and that's
construction
just
jobs.
over the construction time?
Just for the short
Okay.
period that will be there for the
So that's
for the building.
the anticipated income,
Yes, sir.
but we don't know if those are local.
I don't know that I can tell you the methodology, but I
Yeah,
know
that's
WSU
kinda-
has
I guess that's my-
methodology that they assume how many might be local and how many will
Okay.
commute or be from outside the community.
They have a factor that when they plug it in, they assume, because then there is the additional sales tax and et cetera from all those construction workers and everything. So that's the way they factor it in terms of the impact that would have on the local community. The only ones that we can be certain, well, even the 9 permanent jobs, theoretically, they could not live within the city or someplace else, but we know that those will be 7 to start off and then 1 additional for the second and third years. Those will be permanent long-term jobs.
Because it has direct of 280 and total of 505, so what are on the jobs?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
If you look under the V4, it shows jobs, it shows direct 280 and total of 505, so
That could be people that would be delivering construction materials to the site, all those that are involved in the process somehow, but maybe not directly working, building the units themselves.
Okay.
So it could be included people selling hamburgers to the workers at lunchtime. It could be a pretty broad.
Again, some formula, I guess, that I don't have access to, so. yes.
If you want more, I can ask.
Yeah, I mean,
I do think it is important to point out also that there is almost an intangible that you can't calculate, considering we're not saying that this is a panacea and all of a sudden we've snapped our fingers and all of Salina's housing problems are gone, but this is an enormous step. And that's really something that is almost impossible to quantify, to be able to be in a position to deliver this many units to support those businesses that are expanding. Yes, there is that additional economic benefit from sales tax, from construction workers, from the assessed valuation after the 10 years drops off, but there's also that intangible factor of the fact we're at least taking these very significant steps to address this long-term shortage of housing in Salina. So I think that that's one of the much more difficult to quantify benefits to this project.
Well, and I believe when we were discussing all of this and looking for a developer, I think most of them anticipated being able to do IRBs to help. I mean, we have a rent number that we wanted in order to get to that. That's where we got the money from the state, and that's also where the IRBs and all that comes into play. So
Yeah, that's correct.
I don't, this isn't a surprise. This is
No.
something I think we anticipated over the last year.
Our
or two that we've
RFP
been
document
discussing this.
specifically indicated we would not entertain special assessment financing, but beyond that, it did anticipate the possibility of IRBs.
And in point of fact, our RFP also specifically provided that it was, we wanted to keep the rent as low as possible. We were not interested in some of the other proposals that were either supported that weren't market rate, that supported tax credits or otherwise. We're trying to keep the rent low, but we also understood that this is going to be market rate in the longer term. We do have rent caps in the DA. But in the longer term, this is going to be subject to market rates. But we wanted to assist as much as possible as getting this housing as quickly as possible.
Well, we have rent caps. It's not income qualified as far as the residents.
Is there any estimate, the percentage of materials that will be sourced locally?
I know there's been some discussions on previous projects, and that's a really hard one to estimate, Commissioner. So I think their intent would be to buy as much as possible, but it's going to depend on where they can get the best deal and availability of materials.
There's no provision or requirements as part of the development agreement. And the developer, as they presented in the RFP presentations, they have a contractor that they have a relationship with. So I don't know what vendor relationships they might already have in place.
The DA does not specify. Obviously, we would love for them to purchase as much as they could locally, but the DA does not specify that. It becomes very difficult when you're looking at where you want to source something or anything else, and so the DA does not specify that they have to be purchased locally, but we encourage that as much as we can.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the public?
Rosemary Mize, Salina, Kansas. I have a question for Mr. Hennessy. Did I understand you that the construction materials will be forgo any tax?
Yes,
Sales tax.
they'll be sales tax exempt under this proposal.
Okay. And they're going to be forgoing their property tax?
For 10 years, there would be a 100% abatement on the property tax.
I have a problem with that. Everybody's property tax is going up this year, but yet we're giving them free property tax. I know I listened to the radio this morning, and a lot of people are complaining about their property tax going up. And I think that's going to be a beef with most of the citizens in Salina.
And I don't know if anyone wants to answer that, or I can take a stab
Sure.
at it.
A couple
The
things that we
timing,
talked
we
about.
all just received our property tax statements, so I feel the pinch.
As you set the property tax rate, that's an annual exercise. You actually lowered the mill rate for the city. Collectively, the mill rate went up for the average taxpayer in the community. And then the issuance of IRBs and the use of incentives is an ongoing economic development conversation about, does it pay for itself in the end? The point of the WSU study and the analysis is that it concludes that we do come out ahead as a taxing entity at the ratios that Mitch Robertson described. So one would be a break even where the value of the incentives or the value of the tax breaks that we provide are offset by other revenue generated within our economy. Anything in excess of 1 indicates that we're actually seeing a financial benefit from the project. And as Mitch indicated, the numbers on this particular project are exceptionally high, 1.7 in that range. And then you often get into the but-for conversation of would the project happen but for the incentives. And I think we made a decision quite some time ago that this was a priority that wouldn't happen but for the use of incentives.
And I understand the concern, and I think to put it in perspective is we do have a housing shortage, and we don't really have the local expertise to build a 250-unit apartment complex. And with the cost of materials and stuff, we looked at the IRBs. We also looked at the property tax abatement for 10 years, because we went to a developer. We said we need rents in this range, because we need rents that people to fill the jobs we have can afford. And so by using these tools, that's how we were able to get the rents to a market rate, to hopefully have people that can afford to rent these. So it's a catch-22. If we didn't use these incentives, the rates would be considerably higher, and it may not do what we wanted it to do, I guess, is the best way I can come up with.
I think one other way that I've looked at it in the past is, figure out how much property tax we're going to get from that piece of property in the next 10 years if nothing happens.
Yeah.
And yes, you got to wait 10 years before you start truly collecting, but I don't have the number of years, but we ought to catch up fairly quickly, starting year 11.
And I think that's a good point. That's a vacant piece of ground that is generating basically zero property tax. So even though we have something going in there we won't collect for 10 years, you look at year 11 on, and there'll be a significant amount of dollars that'll hit the property tax rolls.
And if you look at our economic development history, I think we have a list or a long line of exceptional projects that are in the offing between Schwann's and Great Plains and Kubota and One Vision, and the projects that you have approved previously as economic development projects are lining up to come back to us in year 11.
And I think the mayor's point is very important to emphasize, because this is a very large number of apartments that, yes, they'll be coming on in staggered components, but what we have here locally is not the capacity generally to build this large a number of units. And so it's very important to be able to attract that and to be able to make sure that we can get these large number of units in order to be able to support all these businesses which have been announcing expansion plans, because that's been something we've heard for quite some time. And again, this takes an enormous step towards trying to address these housing shortfalls that the city is in the past faced for an ongoing period.
And I'm not a big fan of the tax breaks, but it's just kind of the industry standard today that to make things happen in your community, developers, whether it be Kubota, Schwann's, or housing development, it's part of the deal, and to make it happen. And so it's taken a lot to get to this point today, and I think we need to get it moving.
Anyone else?
Norman Mantle, Salina. You're attracting these businesses, but what are you doing to attract companies that are paying a decent wage? These companies are about $10 an hour below where they should be. If you look at inflation from years ago, what you paid for stuff, wages you got years ago, you're about $10 an hour under, just a regular wage. Because I was making better wages than this, what you pay now, 20 years ago. So if the people were making more money, they could afford to pay this rent. But what are you doing to try to get these companies here that are going to pay more wages? Nothing.
Guess we'll just have to agree to disagree there on that one. So, okay, anyone? That's my comment for you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mark Abbott, Polsinelli, counsel for the developer. Mitch and Sean did a great job reciting the facts, the analysis of how we got to this point today. Just want to make myself available if there are questions, be respectful of your time, and close my mouth at that point. So if there's any questions.
Any questions
happy
for
to
the
discuss.
developer?
No questions. I think it's worth mentioning that, the complaints about property tax, that's not lost on me. I'm a real estate investor, which a lot of you probably know already. But I think we've got to look at the long game, which is this is an injection of vitality into the community. It's something that our major employers need and have been asking for years. And bottom line is they have a choice, which is either they wait for us to address those needs or they move on to a different community. And I think that's just worth stating.
Well, and I think the other side of that is, as we're seeing more people come to the community, and I think we're seeing it, is our sales tax revenue continues to increase. And the thought process would be that as sales tax continues to increase, it's going to put less burden on property tax. Again, we've talked about this before. More pressure's been put on property tax because the state has taken away the ability to tax, personal property or machinery and that type of stuff. So we're trying to overcome different items that the state has done that put stress on it. So we hear where you're coming from, and we all pay property tax. And again, we lowered our mill levy this last year, and we'd hope that we can continue to work in that direction to lower at least the city's part. You got to remember, there's a lot of different taxing entities out there. We're just one of several. So, okay, any other comments? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 23-8167.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 23-8167. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. I actually have something I need to pass down to Nikki that needs to get to the county clerk before 5 o'clock, so.
Let's get them built.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, that will lead us to item 5, consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of the meeting of November 20th, 2023.
Okay, are there any additions or deletions, corrections to the minutes from November 20th meeting?
Mayor, I move we approve the minutes of November 20th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item 5.1. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. That will lead us to administration.
Item 6.1, authorize the mayor to sign a letter of recommendation communicating to the United States Department of Transportation the City of Salina's preferred airline selection under the Essential Air Service Program.
Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As you well know, SkyWest has been our provider of air service through the Salina Airport, and they are part of the Essential Air Service Program with the United States Department of Transportation. The USDOT conducts a selection process or a submission process where they identify a deadline and receive applications from air service providers that propose a level of service and a subsidy rate to be funded with Essential Air Service funds. Most recently, that process was conducted with a November 14th submission date. SkyWest resubmitted. There was one other air provider, Boutique Air, that submitted as well. Essentially, SkyWest proposed very similar air service with the exception of what I guess the industry nomenclature is breaking the tag with Hayes, such that it would no longer be it would be a nonstop flight instead of stopping in Hayes. And so the final award has not been made by USDOT, and this is our opportunity to indicate whether we support one proposal over another. I think we've had very good experience with SkyWest in terms of their level of service and the quality of their service. You may recall there was quite a bit of conversation about them looking at possibly a different charter designation to be able to take a different approach. They didn't get that charter designation, so they resubmitted in their current configuration. The Salina Airport Authority is the one that works closely with the air service providers and this EAS process. Tim Rogers, Executive Director of the Airport Authority, is here in attendance, and he is certainly the subject matter expert on all things related to this topic, more so than myself, and I'll welcome him to the podium if he has any comments he wants to make or in response to your questions. As far as fiscal note, there's no direct cost to the city for this action. Essentially, it would be authorizing the mayor to sign the attached letter communicating to the Department of Transportation that our preferred airline selection of SkyWest and suggesting that they award it to SkyWest. With that, I'll give Mr. Rogers the opportunity to add any color commentary, detail, or correct anything I misstated.
Thank you, Mike. No, good job summarizing. And Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, probably one item to add is that we're still rebuilding scheduled air service from back to hopefully pre-pandemic levels. And this is another significant step in that effort. The Salina is the third community that SkyWest Airlines has started again bidding the EAS for EAS contracts as SkyWest Airlines, DBA United Express, 50-seat regional jets, Johnstown, PA, was previously, and Sioux City, Iowa, was previously received the same bids and not the option they were considering of SkyWest Charter, a new subsidiary. This means that also it's unique in that this is the first time we've seen here a 3-year proposal to Salina, Kansas, and this is helps stabilize the service for the community, the county, and the region. The catchment area continues to grow, our market continues to grow, so this is more dependability, reliability going out for the next 3 years. This would be effective January 1st for 3 years. Probably the other item would be that this really is the step that SkyWest is taking to break the tag at Hays, Kansas, which has cost us, we think, approximately about 14,000 passenger enplanements over the past 18 months. And so it's going to really improve the quality of the service. The traveler will be much more satisfied with nonstop to Denver and nonstop Chicago with that 80 stop in Hays. Hays will continue to have essential air service, so it does not impact their service. I've had that question a couple of times, so it's not a negative for Hays. In fact, it means Hays doesn't have to share a 50-seat regional jet as we've been doing with both communities. You will notice in the proposal is for 12 round-trip flights. SkyWest adds 2 additional flights above and beyond the subsidy rate, and those 2 additional flights means 7-day service, 7 days a week, 1 flight to Chicago, 1 flight to Denver, 2 flights per day. So that rounds it up to 14 round-trip flights. And based upon the values in this proposal, their 1114 proposal, these 2 additional flights are valued at $4,922 per trip, or $9,844 per week, $39,376 per month, over $500,000 in benefit and added value to the Salina community that is not being, that the subsidy is not being asked for, that they're flying in essence on their own dollar and going forward. So the recommendation is to go ahead and recommend DOT select SkyWest Airlines for the new essential air service contract for Salina. Those deadline for those comments will be the 30th, so we're moving quickly on this so that DOT can make the selection and have a new contract in place and make that order selecting SkyWest by the end of December. Be glad to answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
Start to my right here.
No questions.
Will SkyWest be continuing to serve Hays?
Yes. That's their, I can't speak for them.
But they're doing the same thing we're doing.
They are not.
They're not.
So, a little background, Salina of about 18 months ago, plus SkyWest filed to terminate service at a number of communities. After that action, SkyWest rescinded the termination notice at Salina. So SkyWest has been operating at Salina without any termination notice, but on an extended contract over the last really 18 months or so. Technically, Hayes is still on a month-to-month status for their service, and SkyWest officially, publicly said they're submitting multi-year contracts, 121 50-seat regional jet, to selected markets. We're the third market that they have submitted their proposal for. So, but it's my understanding and my belief that Hayes will continue to have essential air service. And I have to see that process work out for their proposal process that's pending and will be coming up.
So we should feel pretty fortunate we're doing a 3-year deal then.
I think this is if we were to put this on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, the best we can expect, this is an 11.
And just at the Airport Authority meeting, you referenced the fact that the schedules will go back to a more favorable timing for folks leaving here trying to get to either coast.
That'll be an issue that'll be coming back to you at another time, separate from this. This was the first step to have the Essential Air Service contract in place, multi-year contract. Gary Foss, the Airport Authority's Air Service consultant, and I will be making a presentation to the Salina Community Economic Development Organization on Wednesday at noon, considering that option for an overnight flight in a more preferable and more advantageous schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ryan?
And, I think we've fallen into the rut of SkyWest and the quality of service they provide. I don't know how long ago it was where we struggled mightily, but do you want to comment on just generally the quality of SkyWest services and historically?
The quality, when we measure dependability, measure with U.S. DOT data, they on-time performance within 14 minutes of arrival time at Denver and Chicago, SkyWest outperforms the industry standard virtually every month. So we're on time within 14 minutes. That's the industry standard measure. Completion rate is 96, 98%. And completion rate, may have a weather delay and a weather cancellation that's, unavoidable. But even with the weather we had, the snowstorm we had over the weekend, thunderstorm weather, Denver, Chicago, they're still 96, 98% completing their flights. So yes, there are flights that don't make it. It's because of weather. The fact that SkyWest is a One Vision Aviation customer means that jet, if there is a problem, 9 times out of 10 gets repaired on the spot because One Vision has the staff and the quality and the ability to repair that jet so the flight gets completed. So we have a better than average. SkyWest has been here since 2018 when they came in. Our market was really, doing better with Great Lakes Airlines providing 30-seat turboprop aircraft, but this really made the huge difference. The regional jet service, and most importantly, the code share, the association with United Airlines, and the ability to ticket on United.com, ticket to domestic locations, destinations, and international destinations, that has changed the quality of our air service. Pandemic, pilot shortages have made some changes, but SkyWest has been there with a dependable product, quality product, and branded with the United code share and that standard of flying. So that's a kind of the brief summary over the years what has occurred, and I think this bodes well for the community for stability on air service moving forward. Our personal travel, individuals traveling to meet with family members, and then the business travel, industry travel in and out of Salina.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the public?
Thank you.
Thank you. For staff or Mr. Rogers? Okay, if not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, authorize You to sign the attached letter communicating to the United States Department of Transportation the City of Salina's preferred airline selection of SkyWest Airlines under the Essential Air Service Program.
Second.
We have a motion and a second authorizing the mayor to sign the attached letter communicating to the United States Department of Transportation the City of Salina's preferred airline selection of SkyWest Airlines under the Essential Air Service Program. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Thank you very much for being here, Tim. That'll lead us to item 6.2.
Item 6.2, excuse me, approve resolution number 23-8169, declaring the necessity to acquire firefighting equipment, providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds of the City of Salina to pay for such equipment, and authorizing the publication of the notice of intent.
Ms. Pack.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. We've been talking about some of this for a long time. So during strategic planning in February, March, City Commission kind of directed staff to kind of put together a long-term financial plan. And through the City Manager's Office, the Finance Office, and the departments, we've really been trying to do that. We've taken steps such as buying software to track it. We've done inventories with departments. And we did develop a 10-year comprehensive capital improvement plan, which we presented to you all on July 3rd at a budget study session. And part of this was the replacement of fire equipment apparatus. At that time, we did propose that be paid for through either lease financing or some sort of financing, because we knew that we didn't have the financial capacity to do that all at once through cash. With the assistance of the city's financial advisors and bond counsel, we kind of looked at our options and what the best financing tool would be for that. And we still honestly believe that general obligation bonds provide the best financial option for us, because of the interest rates that we can get are lower than the capital financing interest rates. Today at our study session, we had a long conversation about this equipment and the replacement and the plan. And so that you're familiar with this, I'll go over those items here in a little bit just for the public's awareness. But we did as we were looking for options for financing for this equipment replacement, we realized that KSA statute 12-110C, it authorizes the city that are operating fire departments to issue general obligation bonds. But part of that statute requirements is a notice of intent to issue bonds for fire apparatus equipment replacement, which needs to be published twice, and it also includes a 60-day public protest period that citizens have a 60-day period to bring a protest and file a protest with the county clerk. With this action today, if you do approve the notice of intent, we intend to publish this on December 1st and December 8th, and the protest period would run 60 days from that second publication, or 60 days from December 8th. In the event that a protest would be filed, City Commission would have an option to either run an election or choose another funding source for the project, or choose not to do the project at all. As I mentioned, the pieces of equipment, there's 7 pieces of equipment that the fire department are proposing be replaced. These are all current equipment, ranging in age from 13 years to 34 years old. The original estimates that we got for the replacement of this equipment was a little over $9 million. In the last few days, we've had a lot of conversations with the vendors, trying to get some commitment from them to hold pricing. As we talked about in the study session, the fire equipment and all markets are very volatile, and the equipment goes out about as soon as it's available. So we did work with some of the vendors, and we did get commitments for them to hold some equipment for us, knowing that we had the 60-day protest period that we were dealing with. But in that conversation and that commitment, those prices did go up a little bit, so we will be changing some of the recommendations here. On a fiscal note, that we did include in the 10-year capital improvement plan the aggregate amount of $11.6 million, and we intended to finance that through sales tax. As we analyzed the sales tax performance over the last couple of years and the fund balance and the commitments that we've made thus far from sales tax, we felt like there was a sufficient amount of funding in that fund to pay for the financing of this equipment. Staff is recommending, now we're recommending, we were 9.5, we're recommending a $10 million project authorization, which includes a 5% contingency of the current pricing structure, which is about $9.25 million at this time. Action opportunities for you is to approve the resolution as it is at $9.5 million for project authorization for the acquisition of fire equipment. Option 2 is to approve the resolution with an amendment, which we would recommend to be $10 million, so that we could increase that cost and cover any increases in costs that we might see in the volatile market. You could choose to postpone consideration of the resolution, which would delay the publication and would delay the 60-day protest period. Or you could vote to deny the resolution, which would result in us needing to find another alternative source of funding for this. Staff is recommending option number 2 to make that amendment to a $10 million authorization. I would stand for any questions.
Okay, I'll look to my left. Any questions? Again, we had a study session on all this here earlier today, so any questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I will.
Just ask one. Could you just review in skeletal form the pros and cons of purchasing through the bonds versus the lease
Well,
option?
there's a couple issues at hand. If we issue bonds, the statute requires us to do a publication, 2 weeks publication, and have a 60-day protest period, which is a pro or a con. The public gets their opportunity to have input if they so chose. With a capital lease, there's no requirement for publication or protest period. However, both of the vendors that we're looking at do offer a cash prepayment cash discount that does expire or reduce after December 31st. So the con to waiting and issuing general obligation bonds after this period and not signing an agreement or prepaying would be that we would lose that discount, which is about $385,000. The difference between the financing between the two is more than $385,000, but it's not, I don't know exactly what the numbers are because they're moving so quickly. In the calculations that I did, I think it would cost us about $350,000 to go the capital leasing route as opposed to the bond route at this point.
So would the 350 be on top of the 380?
It includes the 380. So if we took advantage of the 384 and we financed through capital leasing, it would only cost us an additional $350,000, as opposed to the bond issuance, which is a lower interest rate.
Right, so what I'm saying is, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but we're getting the benefit, if we prepay, we get a discount.
Yes.
And then we also, because of the cost of bonding versus leasing, we're also getting a benefit.
But you get a benefit with prepaid, but you get a higher interest rate cost over the life of the financing. Or we get a prepay, but not as much of a prepay discount if we bond finance and let the 60 days run.
Right.
And Debbie is saying that the net comparison between the lease financing with the prepay or the bond financing with a different prepay amount nets
About $350,000.
Okay.
Over here on page 1, it estimates a savings of 1.75% over the bonding versus the lease.
That was at an estimated 6% leasing number.
Yeah.
We did get from a capital leasing consortium that we could get it at about 5.1% if we wanted to go that direction, but it's still much higher than a bond.
And the bonding was like 4.5?
We used 4.2% to
to
5% to include the cost of issuance of bonds, because there are some
million.
additional costs. You have to pay Moody's to rate you, you pay all of your bonding, your bond counsel, and those types of things. Those costs are included in that 4.25% estimate.
I would, the public watching at home that just tuned into this meeting,
at 2:30, we heard a whole hour and a half presentation on this and the need for upgrading our firefighting equipment. So I would recommend people go back and watch this and see what the need is and the direction that we're moving here.
Okay. Questions or comments I think I asked from the public?
And was that clear that if we choose to bond and we wait till after the 60 days, then we would lose the majority of that 300, that prepaid discount that goes through December 31st? I just want to make sure you understood that.
Okay, so we lose that if we wait.
Yeah, there is some proration of it, but we'd lose a majority of it, I would bet.
And this is step one in a multi-step
Yeah.
process. And so this protest period was kind of late-breaking information that changed our analysis at the 11th hour. So as staff, we'll go back and run that side-by-side comparison. And if it looks like there's a significant difference, we'll report that back to you before year end. But if that comes to pass, you will be left with the lease financing in advance of the 60-day protest period policy decision.
Right.
But we'll do that side-by-side analysis, and if it's significant, we'll come back to you.
Okay. Okay, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 238169, providing for project authorization for the acquisition of firefighting equipment at a cost not to exceed $10 million was the suggested amendment, providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds of the city of Salina to pay for such equipment and authorizing staff to publish notice of intent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 23-8169, providing for project authorization of the acquisition of firefighting equipment at a cost not to exceed $10 million, providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds of the city of Salina to pay for such equipment, and authorizing staff to publish notice of intent. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Beck. That will lead us to item 6.3.
Item 6.3, approve resolution number 23-8168, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Jennifer Dahlstrom to provide indigent counsel services for the Salina Municipal Court.
Hello, Judge Stoss. How are you?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Brenda Stoss. I'm the Municipal Court Judge, here today to talk about indigent defense services for Municipal Court and requesting approval of the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Jennifer Dahlstrom to provide those services. The court is obligated to provide counsel for indigent defendants in certain types of cases. We operate with a 3-attorney panel and appoint cases on a rotating basis among those attorneys. The contract is set up for a calendar year, 1-year term, and subject to renewal for an additional 2 years, as long as neither party gives notice of intent to terminate without renewal. We did receive notice from one of our current contract attorneys that he did not intend to renew the contract for 2024, which led us to provide notice to local attorneys that we were looking for a new attorney to take on those services. We are recommending offering that contract to Jennifer Dahlstrom to continue to provide those services. So the options before you today are to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute that contract with Jennifer Dahlstrom. You could adopt the resolution with amendments that you might deem appropriate, or you could deny the resolution, and staff recommends option number 1, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
No questions.
States you have 3 attorneys that rotate, but you just have 2, actually.
We have 3 currently, and
One's dropping off.
correct.
So that'll leave you
When
with
the
2.
contract the term of the current contract ends December 31st, and he has opted not to renew it for the additional year,
So that will leave you with 2.
unless we offer a third one to Jennifer Dahlstrom, correct?
Okay, I just counted. Okay, you got Ally Burris, Julie, okay, and then, okay, I got you.
Okay.
Questions from my left? Okay, questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we adopt resolution number 23-8168, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Jennifer Dahlstrom to provide indigent counsel services for the Salina Municipal Court.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 23-8168, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Jennifer Dahlstrom to provide indigent counsel services for the Salina Municipal Court. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Okay, that will lead us to development business.
Item 7.1, authorize city staff preparation of a special assessment engineering feasibility report for Phase 2 of Lakeview Estates additions number 2 and 3.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This evening, we have 2 written applications from Stan Byquist to be able to utilize special assessment financing to install public improvements in actually 3 separate subdivisions, but the first one is combined into Phase 2 of Lakeview Estates number 2 and
Mr. Andrew, before you go, I think since Mr. Byquist is involved with these, I'm going to recuse myself from both of these, and I'm going to turn it over to Vice Mayor Longbine. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Say that before you got started.
So there's a lot of addition numbers and phase numbers being thrown around, but for Lakeview Estates, the easiest way to keep that straight is that Lakeview Estates addition number 2, which is where the Cedarhurst Senior Living Facility is the property that's west of the Sandpit Lake. And then Mr. Byquist has also platted lots on the south side of the Sandpit Lake, which is Lakeview Estates number 3. So Lakeview Estates number 2, west of the Sandpit Lake, was approved in late 2021. And at that time, the City Commission authorized the preparation of a special assessment engineering feasibility report for Phase 1 of Lakeview Estates number 2. And then in the spring of 2022, you authorized the formation of a special assessment improvement district for Phase 1 infrastructure. And so Phase 1 includes the infrastructure needed to serve the assisted living facility there on Ohio and a stub street, but it also involved the construction of a looped water line that went from Ohio and extended south all the way to connect to the Stone Lake addition. So there was infrastructure in Phase 1 that was installed that benefited lots in Phase 2. And then in 2023, the City Commission gave final approval to annexation, zoning, and platting of the addition number 3 on the south side of the Sandpit Lake. And so the infrastructure is now complete in Lakeview Estates addition number 2, Phase 1, and the Cedarhurst Assisted Living Facility is very close to opening. This request is coming under our special assessment finance policy, which creates a 2-step process. So this evening is step 1, and if this request is approved, it only authorizes the engineering staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report. It doesn't actually create the benefit district. And so earlier this year, you've given step 1 approval for Phase 2 of Wheatland Valley Addition, which was 24 lots, and for Phases 1 and 2 of Stone Lake Addition number 2, which was 48 lots. The engineering estimate of cost for Phase 2 improvements is $473,000, and it's over $1 million for Lakeview Estates number 3. Part of that is that the water line that serves Phase 2 has already been installed, so the assessment for additional improvements is slightly lower than what you would normally see. We've provided information about the life cycle costs of both the streets and the utility improvements. There's no additional improvements that would occur outside the boundaries of these subdivisions that would affect other subdivisions or the city at large. We do not have projected price of the apartment lots, and there's really no comparables because there's really a shortage of buildable vacant apartment lots within the community, so we don't really have anything to compare that to. The projected market price of the townhome lots along the lake is $75,000 to $100,000. And the non-townhome lots, it would be $45,000 to $55,000. The developer has indicated that he is proposing to construct townhomes in the $300,000 to $450,000 range for the lakeside lots. The number of units and cost of construction of any apartments is not known at this time, but essentially the developer, Mr. Byquist, is proposing to put infrastructure in, so he has shovel-ready apartment lots, which currently there is a shortage of today. So I did want to point out that the estimate for assessments for Phase 2 of Lakeview Estates number 2 is about $49,000 per lot, whereas for addition number 3, it's close to $87,000 per lot. And the reason for that is that the layout in the lot south of the lot, it's a fairly long street and some fairly wide and large lots, and there's 11 lots on the north side of the street and only 4 lots on the south side of the street. And so usually in a subdivision you can share the cost of a street equally on either side, but in this case most of the cost of the street is going to go to the lots on the north side, which makes for higher specials. So in terms of having multiple benefit districts, all 12 lots that are in Phase 1 have received some assessment for water and sewer line extensions. There's no assessments currently on the property south of the lake. And so we don't see any foreseeable obstacles or difficulties to issuing building permits on any of these lots once the infrastructure is in place. So we did want to make one comment about the debt payment and management considerations. And working with the finance director, we were kind of looking at these individually in isolation, and she indicated that we are currently at 36% of our debt capacity in terms of these ongoing debt we have for selling bonds for public improvements. But I did want to indicate and report that we have Wheatland Valley Phase 1, where we've issued building permits but have not yet assessed final costs to the individual lots. We have Cedar Point on Cedar Ridge Drive, Cedar Ridge Addition number 2 on Cedar Ridge Drive, and Magnolia Hills Estates number 2, Phase 2, as well as the Cedarhurst property where the infrastructure is complete, but those final costs have not been assessed to those lots. So although looking at this in isolation, the approval of this one phase would increase the total debt by 1%, I wanted to give the commission the whole picture that there's a number of outstanding subdivisions that have already been approved where those bonds have not been sold yet for those improvements. So that number of 37% is just reflective of this individual subdivision. So the options that we've identified for you this evening relate to number 1, we could authorize staff to prepare a feasibility report and resolution advisability for both Phase 2 of Lakeview Estates Addition number 2 and Lakeview Estates number 3 for your future consideration. You could authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report for the Phase 2 area only west of the sand pit lake and not south of the lake at this time. You could postpone consideration of this request to a future meeting date and provide additional direction to staff, or you could vote to instruct staff not to proceed with preparation of an engineering feasibility report at this time. So we have provided maps of these areas in the packet, and again, the Phase 2 area is that area that is west of the Sandpit Lake between there and Ohio, and addition number 3 is 15 lots located south of the Sandpit Lake. So with that, staff would be open to any questions that you have.
Questions from commissioners?
And for me.
Just one question regarding our debt limit. This debt does not count against the 2 separate debt,
I'm going to ask Ms. Pack to answer.
and I'm blocking on, I can't recall the term of the other.
General obligation
Thank you.
debt, but the manner in which we issue this debt, I think, combines the two.
Yes, when we calculate our debt limit, we do include it because unless we issue it separately as a separate issuance, it doesn't get separated out, if that makes sense. But it typically, it should not reflect on that, but because we issue debt, we don't issue the special assessment debt as an individual issuance. It's combined with the total general bond obligations.
In our housing plan, were there any, we had housing price ranges that we were considering as suitable for incentives. I don't think we considered special lot prices and infrastructure. Are there any guidelines? Because 87,000 a lot is kicking up there kind of high.
Right.
I'm assuming that there are probably buyers for these lots, or the project wouldn't be proposed, but do we have any guidelines for that?
Well, our housing study is stratified by income, by price point, as well as housing product type. But the market's done a lot of crazy things since the last time we updated the housing study. So one of the comparison items that staff provides is kind of those price points and how many units are in different price points as a means of comparison. At the bottom of page 9 shows there under item number 3 the different price categories that are currently reflected in the housing study. I know Development Services Director Driscoll is on remotely. I don't know if she might have anything to add.
I would hope all of these would be in that top category.
Well, that's the other thing. The developer is here and might be able to speak to his assessment of the market. But Ms. Driscoll, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm in agreement with what you've said. I think the only thing to remember too is we haven't looked at special assessments as an economic incentive. And so specials have always kind of gone along with that's the price of development for residential construction in the community.
Now, as I'm reading at the bottom of page 9, that 87 number is skewed by the lakefront lot. The higher prices of the lake lots balancing higher the lots that are off the lake.
Yeah, this
Quite a
would be-
difference there, but that's up to the individual promoter to decide what his lot prices are going to be.
Correct. This subdivision has a unique mixture, more so than kind of a more homogeneous residential subdivision might.
Yeah, I think, if we were close to our limit, I'd have to say, wow, do I really want to spend 1% of our limit for
Right.
such a small number of homes? We have room to operate in. And it's not money that the city is, we hope, never going to have to actually pay back itself.
Right. The specials are due and payable at the time that they're certified. So the developer would be paying those specials until such time as the property sold to a subsequent buyer. And then there are financial securities that are acquired as well to protect against default.
that particular item on page 10, what we try to do in every report is provide a ratio of what the special assessments would be vis-a-vis the lot price. And so because of the variability of the lakeside lots versus the other lots, the projected assessments will be 116% to 190% of the as-developed lot prices. In our more recent special assessment requests, most of those have been a lot closer to the 116 or 120% number than the 190% number, but that is skewed by, if I had a non-lakeside townhome lot and it was $50,000, then having an $87,000 assessment for that has a much higher ratio than if it was the same assessment for a lakeside lot. So that number is intended to reflect that range of how much the assessments are compared to the projected lot price.
Well, each time I see a lot or a house being built like that, I'm assuming that whoever's living in that house is contributing to keeping 3 or 4 other families employed. So it's, in a way, it's a good sign to see houses like that being sold.
The term is in their special assessment engineering feasibility report, and if that report was provided to Mr. Byquist and he decided he was not, that it was not feasible to move ahead with that level of assessments, then he would choose not to go to step 2. But we might want to check with him on his reaction to my calculation, which was taking his engineer's estimate and dividing it over the 15 lots.
He hasn't looked too worried from where I'm sitting right now, so.
Commissioner Linwood, questions?
I do not have any questions.
It does sound like a lot of money, but it's not the city's not going to be paying it. It'll be the homeowners, the lot owners, and that does sound like a lot, but I can attest that lots on the water are a premium, and this does say for future consideration. So, Mr. Byquist, do you have a comment?
Stan Byquist, Salina. Yeah, it is a lot of money. But I look at Stone Lake and how fast to the south of me, and I look how fast it's developed and the need for the lakeside lots. And as you just referred to, lakeside lots in this town, there will only be a few. And I think the demand is there, or I wouldn't be moving forward. I'll bring up to date on Cedarhurst. The construction on phase 1 of all the improvements is done. Cedarhurst will be opening on January 1, as they tell me.
Has it been certified for occupancy?
I don't know yet. I'm just what they're telling me. I don't know that. I don't speak for them.
Okay.
Okay, speaking of them.
I get that question frequently. When's it going to open?
They tell me January 1. They had a few minor things to finish up. They didn't want to try bringing occupants in during the holidays. They chose to wait till after the holiday, get everything done, get everything done for the city. That's the latest that I know. I was responsible for putting in all the infrastructure. That is all in and complete, and there's just 2 little minor things on the punch list, and those are supposed to be completed next week, and that should be signed off by the city. But a lot of phase 1 of Lakeview was infrastructure for phase 2 or addition to, and also for the apartment land. As we know, there's a need for some more apartments, and possibly that'd be a good site. But as you
are finding out with your current project, you're having to annex land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This will be shovel-ready land. Once Phase 2 is done, the apartment land is ready. So that is my goal. When you get to Phase 3, yes, it's expensive, but there will be 11 lake lots, and I anticipate they'll have a much higher building price tag and more of a sales tax, et cetera, to the city, and I'm sure I'm going to have to discount those lots because of the specials, but there's a demand out there. And with that, I'll take questions.
Answered all mine. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you for your time.
I see it happening in Wichita frequently. There's many sand pits in North Wichita, and it blows my mind.
It is, and in Salina, there's very few.
Yeah, it's limited. So.
Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Any questions or comments from the public? We'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that we authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report and resolution of advisability for Phase 2 of Lakeview Estates Edition Number 2, 10 lots parenthetical, and Lakeview Estates Number 3 for future consideration by the City Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report and resolution of advisability for Phase 2 of Lakeview Estates Edition Number 2 and Lakeview Estates Number 3 for future consideration by the City Commission. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. That'll bring us to item 7.2.
Item 7.2, authorize city staff preparation of a special assessment engineering feasibility report for Phase 1 of Magnolia Hills Estates Edition Number 3.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Commissioners. This is also a written application received by Mr. Stan Byquist on behalf of Magnolia Hills, Inc. And this is, again, a Magnolia Hills property. It comprises 46 acres that run along the west side of Holmes Road all the way south to Magnolia, and the subdivision plat has 112 residential building lots in it. This subdivision has 2,400 feet of frontage on Holmes Road, which serves as the direct access perimeter street for the subdivision. And as you're aware, Holmes Road is a gravel road that does not meet city street standards or even an interim street standard in its current condition. And so in working with the developers over a period of time, they expressed their desire to negotiate a development agreement with the City Commission because they felt they couldn't bear the 100% of the cost of improving Holmes Road to even an interim street standard. In lieu of a development agreement, the City Commission approved a special assessment district for Holmes Road to bring it up to the interim street standard with sidewalk and drainage improvements north of Magnolia Road along the entire frontage of the subdivision. And this benefit district was formed on November 4th, 2019. And the way the benefit district was set up, and there's a map in your packet that I provided, the cost was 31.4% of the projected cost would go to the property comprising Magnolia Hills Estates Number 3, and nearly 69% would be city at large. But the way that the benefit district was set up is that there are other benefiting properties along Holmes Road, particularly on the east side. And so the way it was set up as a 12-6A-19 benefit district, the intent of the city is to cost recover those street improvement costs at the time the properties on the east side develop. So the city will be fronting some of the cost up front with the hope for cost recovery on the back end. when this plat came forward, looking at the $31,000 per lot for the home road improvements in addition to the assessments for internal improvements. This request that has come before you this evening is only for a Phase 1 area in the western part of the subdivision adjacent to addition number 2, and this phase contains 23 lots. So just by way of background, you have previously approved resolutions of advisability and authorization for Phase 1 of Magnolia Hills addition number 2, which was 29 lots. That's just about fully built out, and so they moved on to Phase 2. That infrastructure is complete, and we've started issuing building permits in the Phase 2 area. And so the area that we're discussing this evening is directly to the east and adjacent to Magnolia Hills Estates number 2. And so for the internal improvements, the estimated cost for Phase 1 public improvements is $1,187,000. And so we wanted to clarify that by doing this phase, that will not result in a street connection being made to Holmes Road at this time. In your packet, there's a phasing plan that includes a Phase 1, a Phase 2, a Phase 3, and a Phase 4. And so the need for improvements to Holmes Road will occur when a physical street connection is made to Holmes Road. And as I noted, all of the lots in Magnolia Hills Estates number 3 will be subject to assessment for Holmes Road. The projected market price of developable lots in this subdivision is $25,000 to $35,000 per lot. In the applicant's petition, he indicated that projected finished home prices were in the $225,000 to $290,000 range based on recent construction costs increases. They're probably more likely to going to be in that higher range. In this Phase 1 area, there's no innovative housing products being proposed. These are all single-family building lots. And we have projected that, based on the engineer's estimates, that the specials will be $56,000 per lot. And so there are currently no assessments against this property. All the lots, as I noted, that's comprised this Phase 1 area will be included in the benefit district that was created for paving Holmes Road. And so that resolution of advisability is recorded in the Register of Deeds office. In some cases, the city has recorded a notice of future assessments separately against the lots, which can be done in this case if that was an item of concern for the city commission. So in other words, the city records a document that runs against each lot in the subdivision, so as title work is done on that lot, it's picked up that that lot is potentially subject to future assessments. We've had mixed success with that. We had a notice of future assessments that was recorded in the Tasker addition along Schilling Road, and even though that was recorded in the deeds office, the city commission still had a room full of people who came to the hearing on the special assessments and said they had no idea that they were subject to future assessments, even though it was included in their title work. So we can do the best we can, but if that's your desire to do something above just recording the resolution, we can move forward with that as an option as well. And so in terms of price points, these are moderate cost housing in the $220,000 to $295,000 price range. When we get to Phase 4, that property along Holmes Road is zoned for townhome development, but that's not part of this request. And so we talked about where we are with our debt capacity, and in consulting with the finance director, we noted that we have, as I pointed out earlier, we have Wheatland Valley Phase 1, we have Cedar Point, Cedar Ridge Phase 2, Magnolia Hills Estates Addition Number 2, Phase 2, and the Cedarhurst property. All of these have infrastructure that's nearly complete, but those final costs have not been levied yet, and so that will certainly add to the 37% of our debt capacity. We have completed a request from Stone Lake Addition Number 2, but we're also working on requests for Overlook Estates, and maybe bringing you that before the end of the year. But that is also a step 1 request. So, again, this is a 2-step process. It's designed to give you the opportunity to review the proposed development, the proposed housing types and price points, and projected assessments, so you can assess the likelihood of the proposal's success. Your options on this application would be to authorize staff to move ahead and prepare an engineering feasibility report for Mr. Byquist for the 23 lots contained in Phase 1. You could postpone consideration of this request to a future meeting date and provide staff with additional direction regarding information you'd like to have before acting, or you could vote to instruct staff not to proceed with preparing an engineering feasibility report at this time. Again, Mr. Byquist is representing Magnolia Hills, Inc. tonight, and I'll stand for any questions you have. He can tell you more about their vision for this next phase, but it will likely be very consistent with what you're seeing in Magnolia Hills Estates Number 2, which is currently building out.
Questions?
No questions.
Just have a few. Is there any reason to not add the notice of future assessment?
There's
to the
no
properties?
reason not to. It's an additional step by, I went to the Register of Deeds office and confirmed that the resolution of advisability, so when you pass a resolution of advisability that authorizes the use of special assessments for a subdivision, that does get recorded in the Register of Deeds, so that theoretically somebody could find that in doing their title work and see that there may be future assessments. And notice of future assessments is something that's a little shorter and more direct and more likely to be readily identified than the resolution of advisability.
Because
So,
it seems like,
no, there's no reason we can't do that. We've done it before.
it seems like the other way got overlooked by.
And correct me if I'm
Several
wrong, but
folks, yeah.
we could do that at the point that we approve the resolution of advisability?
Yes.
Or, so it wouldn't necessarily have to be something that you provided instruction with step 1. We could do it as part of step 2, but just wanted to point out that this will flow into special assessments being assessed after these lots are occupied.
It's not a standard requirement, but there have been cases, and one of the things about our special assessment policy is that you pay for the street in front of your house, and then you also get assessed for the closest side street. And sometimes that side street can come along 10, 12, 15 years after the street in front of your house is built. And so those are the cases where providing notice to someone that they could be subject to a future assessment is helpful. We don't do it in every case, but here, where lots are potentially subject to 2 different assessments and 2 different benefit districts, it can only help if we do that.
Right. And my next statement isn't meant to be cynical, but it seems though there was a line that would roughly go just east of New Covenant Church, and once started building east of that line, Holmes Road improvement was going to be triggered.
Well, the line that was drawn was every property west of that line was identified as benefiting from and being in the benefit district for Markley, and everything east in the benefit district for Holmes Road. But based on the direction at the time that the districts were formed, the condition that was placed on the plat was that the developers are responsible for improving 2,400 lineal feet of Holmes Road from the north edge of the subdivision to Magnolia Road to applicable public street standards at the time that a public street connection to Holmes Road is made. And so they're not making a physical connection at this time. The other trigger that was placed in there at the time was when traffic on Holmes Road exceeds 250 vehicles a day. Well, any street connection coming out of this subdivision is going to push it over 250 vehicles a day.
But the way this is being added, it looks like it's possible to build this whole thing out with ever connecting to Holmes Road. Everything just keeps getting sent back to Markley, which is, I don't know if the fire marshals approve that. And, at some point, I can see what's going to happen. Holmes Road have to get built, and everybody in West Salina is going to be paying for Holmes Road.
Well, the way
which won't
to
make them terribly happy.
address that is to decide what the boundary of Phase 2 is.
I thought we'd already decided years ago that once a brick was laid east of a certain line, that was going to trigger Holmes Road, whether it was connected or not. And I may be wrong on that. I don't know if it's easy to look that
We
up.
definitely identified a line of demarcation where responsibility for the road improvements would go to Markley or Holmes. Without researching it further, I can't recall whether we indicated that no development would occur or whether this approach would
Because
be
one of the other
applied.
phases was approved because it abutted that line, but the traffic was going back to Markley. And once we got east of that line,
I'll just read from the Benefit District petition that was signed. It says, petitioner acknowledges that construction of the improvements will not connect until the city determines that the average daily traffic counts on Holmes Road near the intersection with Magnolia Road exceed 250 trips per day. At our last and most recent count, it's still right around 220 trips per day, or at such later time as determined by the governing body to be in the best interests of the city.
so
that's
if this never connected with Holmes traffic would have to grow on its own, because according to this map, Phase 3 is not gonna.
Well, according to their phasing plan, when they do Phase 3, they're going to have 2 physical connections to Holmes Road, which would trigger the improvements at that time.
So those connections would be part of Phase 1. Phase 3.
If you don't want to see that happen, then the solution would be to tell the developers they can't do Phase 2 without doing Phase 3, and then if a majority of the governing body determined it was in the best interest of the city to do it at that time, that would be the time to do it.
So right now, we're looking at only Phase 1.
We're looking at 23 lots that are going to connect off of Stone Post Lane and Ridge Hill and build off of the existing street network.
And you still have fire protection back that far?
Still
I mean,
have-
within whatever our,
We still
Time
have
response.
the 2 connections to Markley Road, and they would be coming from Markley Road. As I understand it, from visiting with the fire department, they're still, if they're going to Magnolia Hills Estates, their fastest way to get there is to turn off of Markley Road, and it would not be the normal course that they would go all the way around to Holmes Road to come in the other way.
so this is just Phase 1, correct?
You are being asked to authorize the use of assessments for public improvements in Phase 1. But the governing body controls the timing, which preserves your control by the language that says, or at such later time as determined by the governing body to be in the best interests of the city.
So which one of those two options takes precedent? If Holmes Road next week goes up to 300 cars a day, does that automatically trigger it, or does the city commission then still have the ability to determine in its own wisdom when it should be done?
Well, conceivably, if they don't make a physical connection to Holmes Road and something happens at Holmes Road that causes it to exceed 250 trips a day, that would trigger the construction of those improvements,
Even without the connection?
even without the connection, because it's based on
And
traffic
you say
count.
currently it's 220?
It has been remarkably consistent. Like, for 25 years, the traffic count on Holmes Road has been like 220 vehicles per day. I mean, 20 years ago, it was 220. 10 years ago, it was 220. Most recently, it was 220. It's just consistently that.
Where is that, along what part of Holmes Road is that measured?
It's measured in different parts, but it's measured south of Magnolia Road, or excuse me, north of Magnolia Road.
But all the way in, like half a mile in, or at the
Well, any
intersection?
vehicle that's going north on Holmes from Magnolia.
Okay.
And any vehicle that's coming south out of Holmes Road to Magnolia would be counted. So it's 24-hour count, vehicles going both directions over a traffic counter.
I think we've heard this before, but refresh me. The city limit line is the east ditch of Holmes Road, is that correct?
Yes. Holmes Road is not yet in the city limits.
Holmes Road is not in the city limits?
Yes, it's at the time that this was done, we did not annex the roadway.
Okay.
So that would make it the west
Yeah, it would
side.
make it the west ditch
Okay,
line.
I had in mind that it was the east side, but, yeah.
So this property was actually annexed all the way back in 2000, and the annexation left the entire road in Saline County because there was no right-of-way for the road.
Yeah, I know that it has been in the housing study to develop that between Magnolia and Crawford along Holmes Road, and it's on the agenda to seek Department of Transportation funding for it, so I think
This benefit district is already adopted and it's in place, so it's not, the discretion that I see in that is that it happens automatically when trips exceed 250 cars a day, but if you, as a governing body, thought it was in the best interest to do it at a later time, you could do that. But I don't see anything in there that gives discretion to do it earlier than that, but I'll defer to Mr.
I think that's
Bates.
what I was asking, which one of those, I'm more fearful of us delaying it than I'm worried about us accelerating it.
The discretion rests with the governing body, so it would be.
So no matter what the traffic count is,
Well, in terms of delaying it.
delaying it, right?
And I think the housing market's gonna determine a lot of it, how quickly this builds out.
Not that I'm in a hurry to spend that money. I will tell you, there's probably a lot of people that are not using that road because it's not paved. And I'm one of them. I would probably use that stretch of road from Country Club Road to Magnolia every single day, at least twice, if not 4 times.
I only have to go 150 feet on it to drop my dog off in the morning, that first property. And I can't imagine folks having their houses near there with all that dust kicking up. And of course, this phase is probably going to be far enough from homes that the dust will dissipate before it gets to them. But it's a mess, particularly when of course, when it rains, there's not as much dust, but a lot more mud.
Commissioner Ryan?
Well, I thought we were talking about when homes would be improved, and this was the trigger. I had forgotten the traffic count. My recollection was it was closer to phase 4, that the improvements would be made to homes, but I also recognize that short of the improvements on Magnolia, homes is pretty important to improve. I don't think it's fair to the developer to change the arrangements that we have. But I also feel that once some of this build-out happens, I can't imagine the traffic count's not going to go over the 250 and trigger the improvement of the roads.
Well, it can't go up because there's no way to get to homes. I mean, until
Isn't there some access road that the
for
fire
emergency.
department uses or
Well,
emergency vehicles use?
there's a construction access road that goes from Holmes Road into this area that contractors have been using to put in the infrastructure so that they don't have to drive through the subdivision. And they'll probably use that to put the infrastructure in this phase as well.
And is that a closed road? Is it gated?
I'm not aware that it's gated,
Yeah.
but I know the people
I know
who
how
live
I'd
in the
go home if
subdivision
I had a
wouldn't
new
want it
house
being used
back
as a shortcut, so.
Well, I think my bigger worry here is the Magnolia Bridge with all this increased traffic and development, so. Mr. Byquist have any comments on this one?
Stan Byquist, Salina, representing Magnolia Hills. This request is just for phase 1 of addition 3. I have to keep it straight. We just finished addition 2, or phase 2 of addition 2, and we are selling lots and building permits have been issued. There's only 16 lots there. I will correct one thing in my application. Because of inflation and the price of housing, I think the housing in this phase will probably be from $250 to $350 and even upwards when you start getting into custom homes. I hate to say that, but it just happens to be a fact of construction costs right now. When we get to Holmes Road, I personally anticipate that the 250 will trigger it rather than waiting for us to get there. As development happens, I think the 250 count's not too far away. And I will add this, there is the emergency access road out of Magnolia Hills to Holmes. Construction workers use it. It is an open access gravel road to be used, and maybe others will start using it, and that'll trigger homes. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Questions, comments from the public?
Norman Manuel Salina, at the first part of Dean's speech, he said the city's going to have to finance some costs up front. Now we're getting back into the tax issues. We're going to have to spend more of the taxpayers' money. So you're going to have to quit giving people tax breaks. Number 2, we just had an issue with Jerry Ivy Park Pond. We closed that and filled it up. What about these ponds in these other developments? Are we going to be filling them up down the road? Because that's a hazard, eco hazard. I got more to speak on that later.
Anyone else? I might add, we get criticized a lot that the city's not growing. But man, after tonight's meeting, we're breaking ground on a lot of development, a lot of housing. So bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Vice Mayor, there's no option here with an amendment to add in the notice of future assessments?
That certainly doesn't preclude you from
Okay.
doing that.
We
Just
could
wanted
do
to make
that
sure.
at a future point in the process, right?
Or,
You could-
well, that's what I was going to
you
ask.
I'd like
you.
to think on that. I mean, I really think it's the realtor's role to inform, or if you're purchasing it directly from the owner of the land, they should have a duty to,
Oh,
at least a moral obligation to tell you that there is that.
I agree, but when it doesn't go right, argument lands on our lap. I just want to
If
keep it
you
from landing
looked
on
at
our lap.
option one, and you could simply say authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report for future consideration and direct staff to prepare and record a notice of future assessments for Holmes Road. We could take that as your direction.
Okay, well, I'll make the motion, see what happens. Authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report and a resolution of advisability for Phase 1 of Magnolia Hills Estates Edition Number 3, and direct staff to prepare a notice of future assessments for these
To be recorded
to be recorded
against each lot.
against each lot. Period. I don't know. I won't take it personally, but I just wanted to get it out there. Okay,
Do I hear a second?
Just for clarification, we can do that later in the process.
You can. You could do it here, or you could do it at the point the resolution of advisability comes back to you.
Okay.
We have a motion. Any second? Bring this back for consideration.
Mayor, if you'll accept an alternate motion, I'd authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report and a resolution of advisability for Phase 1 of Magnolia Hills Estates Number 3, 23 lots for future consideration by the City Commission as requested.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility study report and resolution of advisability from Phase 1 of Magnolia Hills, Edition Number 3, for future consideration by the City Commission as requested. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We'll welcome back Mayor Hoppeck.
Okay, thank you. That leads us to other business. Is there an item a commissioner would like to bring before the group? Look to my left.
I just commend city staff for hitting the first snowstorm of the season, and I thought I would hear comments about one thing or another, but it's been pretty quiet, so I guess everyone's happy.
I was out on them Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning early, and they were in good shape, so thanks staff for that, so.
Mayor, I do have one thing. We've talked previously about the possibility of having a consultant come and make a presentation on homelessness, and the state of Kansas has engaged the services of Julia Orlando, and so she's kind of making the rounds in different communities. We have the opportunity to host her December 6th, which is next Wednesday, and so we are making arrangements for her to make a community presentation from 6 to 8 p.m. on December 6th. We're also making arrangements for her to meet with staff and service providers in the afternoon to just kind of do a strengths and weaknesses analysis and talk about service gaps, that type of thing. But
Do we have a location for that?
Would that be here?
I believe we're going to do it in the chamber annex. Last I knew, the arrangements were being made for that, and
Okay.
we'll have, once it gets finalized, we'll get the word out.
Get a notice out.
But
What
just
is her
wanted to
name again?
forewarn you. Julia Orlando.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay, if not, that will bring us to Citizens Forum. That's an opportunity for individual to come before the commission. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Norman Mount, Salina, Kansas. Why did the city commissioners allow a business to come to Salina that produces and sells a product that is causing harm and hazards to the entire ecosystem. How much research was done on a company that has moved to town? Here's an article done in the Audubon Society by Professor McLeod, professor in entomology. These companies are providing crop seeds that's causing entire contamination of our water and our soil. Corporate interests of Big Ag have quietly and insidiously abandoned these principles and effectively returned us to the environmental responsibility of 1950s agriculture. It is time for concerned citizens of the United States, catalyzed by organizations such as AOK, to demand federal legislation that bans the use of these compounds. These seed companies, who are now treating all seed of almost every crop, is contaminating our water, is contaminating our soil, and you let a company come to town that's doing this. So this is a 2023 printing from the Audubon Society. We better be worrying about our water and our economy, our environment. How much research is done on this company that moved this to town?
Okay, is there anyone else?
How do you do, gentlemen? Richard Humphrey, 315 South Ohio. I've been absent for a while. It's good to see you guys. I had the experience for the past 6 months to do an end-of-life doula training with an individual that is going through the end-of-life cycle. I know that there's some federal grants and also some opportunities for respite care. I'm hoping that this is going to kind of trickle down to your constituents and maybe the right healthcare personnel to look into this, kind of these educational opportunities that are out there, you know, as far as elderly care is one of my, I guess, not my niche yet, but the direction that I've been floating over the course of this year. So I'm not really sure on how to promote that. All I know is I read the back of this and we're not passing out any written materials, so I'll follow suit with that. But again, hopefully this gets passed down to the right personnel that could look into this type of training and potentially be of aid for those families that need that. And again, a doula to me is more or less just the non-professional bridge to the resources in the community and also a guidance, you know, through the end-of-life cycle, because there's a lot of beauty, and you can judge a society, community, a family, an individual, how they handle death. So just trying to here to have fun, and it feels good to be back in the presence of you good gentlemen, and that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, if not, we have an executive session on our schedule. I'm sorry, somebody else. You snooze, you almost lose.
Yeah. I thought everybody else had a comment to make, and I was last
No,
in, so I thought I was
if you
last
could give
in
us your
line.
name and
My
where you're
name
from,
is
please.
Arthur Jones. I live at 231 North 2nd Street. And I have two questions for the council. One, the parking lot that's being repaved at the corner of North Santa Fe and Ash Street. 2 weeks ago, I work at a business around the corner from that, and 2 weeks ago, we got a letter saying they were gonna start and they were gonna be finished that week. It's 2 weeks later, they're still not finished. Is there a performance clause in this contract, and how much money of the $1.1 million do we get back? And two, the city of Salina has a lot of these fun runs that are started Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, and they seem to be spaced an even number of weeks apart, because I work every other Saturday, and they're always on the Saturday I work, which always makes me late for work. Is it possible we could space these an odd number of weeks apart, so
I appreciate trying to get people to come downtown, but if you're going to handicap the workers who run these businesses on Saturdays, it seems to defeat the point. Thank you for your time. Okay. And I know, first of all, fun and run don't go in the same sentence for me, so that's a whole different story. But I know that when we do races, and you said every other week, I know we have some, and they work through the city and SDI on a scheduling, so.
Yeah, I think that's purely coincidental in terms of matching your schedule. But we do try to work with the organizers and SDI and then try to get the word out so that you can see it coming, so that you
I
can
do believe
leave
this
early.
last few, we did have the Frosty Fun Run, and then we had the marathon that was fairly close together, so
Yeah.
I don't know of anything coming up in the near future.
Yeah, I
so.
think you'll be clear for the
for
foreseeable
a while,
future.
yeah, so. And on the parking lot, the gentleman, you can answer, or you can see him after the meeting if you want to. Mr. Toich will be glad to, I know he's in charge of that project, so I think he can maybe answer your question, so, because I know I sure can't, so. Okay, anyone else? Okay, we do have an executive session. I think let's, probably 15 minutes ought to be plenty of time. And in that meeting with the commission will be Natalie Fisher, who is Head of Human Resources for the City of Salina.
Okay, with that, Mr. Mayor, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss the city manager's evaluation based upon the need to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319. Section B, subsection 1, the open meeting will resume in this room at 6:17.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to move into executive session for 15 minutes, returning here at 6:17, and there will be no action to follow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We'll be back here in 15 minutes. Okay, we are back in session and there's no action to be taken. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll see everyone back here next week.